Saltz von Gestiberg, the guy who just got dropped, isn't just some random person. Turns out he's the owner of the workshop and the Holy Sword Guildmaster in the capital, making him someone who was never actually an artisan. He's just a noble and a former government guy who used to handle taxes and money, but ever since he grabbed all that power 3 years back, he's been using it for himself. He blows through workshop money at bars and clubs under the guise of business, all while treating any worker who doesn't listen to him like garbage. The guy has basically built a reputation as a total scumbag who only cares about what he wants, and it's exactly like what happened that one time. Salt starts yelling at a young girl, demanding to know if she seriously failed her task again. He gets right in her face, asking when she's going to make something actually good and telling her she can't hide behind being a rookie forever. The girl tries to speak up, saying that failing is just a part of how transmutation works, but Saltz doesn't want to hear it and just barks at her to stop making excuses. Gauche steps in and puts a hand on the girl's shoulder to protect her. He looks Saltz right in the eyes and tells him that what she said is the truth. Saltz is fuming, his face getting all sweaty as he glares at Gauche, clearly annoyed to see the guy getting in his way again. Gauche stays calm, explaining that forging a holy sword changes based on stuff like temperature and the spirit's personality, then tells the girl she can head out. Saltz loses it and starts yelling again, screaming that dealing with all those tiny details is exactly what her job is supposed to be. Gauche doesn't back down, just repeating that having skill alone isn't enough to make it work, but Saltz just rubs his head like he's dealing with idiots, asking if he's really demanding that much. He just wants them to make something worthy of his name. The guy starts complaining about how everyone is too soft, saying every worker he has quits the second he gives them even a little bit of criticism. Then Saltz gets this creepy look on his face, laughing to himself as he remembers the guy who quit just the other day, and he starts bragging about how hilarious it was watching how that guy went out, clearly proud of how he ruined him. It turns out Saltz used his power to blacklist Gauche from every shop in town. Now Gauche is just standing there as another owner tells him they can't hire him. The shop owner looks pretty stressed as he admits Gauche is skilled, but explains that his shop just doesn't have the guts to pick a fight with the guild, so Gauche doesn't make a scene. He just says it's fair enough and apologizes for being unreasonable by even asking. As he walks away from the last shop, it hits him that he's officially visited every single workshop in the capital and got the same answer, reminding him of how Saltz looked right after their fight, face all bruised up and bloody, swearing he'd never forgive Gauche for hitting him. The guy was losing his mind, screaming that he'd use his power to make sure Gauche never worked at another workshop in the capital ever again. Gauche just sighs as he remembers those threats, realizing the noble actually followed through on every word, but he doesn't look defeated. He just tells himself all right, like he's finally making a big decision about what comes next. He decides right then that he's going to open his own workshop, thinking this is the perfect chance to chase the dream he's had since he was a kid. It turns out he isn't just dreaming either. He already has a specific location in mind for his new base of operations, and it's way out in the frontier, a place so far away that the capital's Holy Sword Guild can't touch him. The carriage finally makes its way across the open plains, heading straight for the frontier city of Ortiz. As they pull up, Gauche leans out the window and just stares. He's totally blown away by the scale of the place. He lets out a tired sigh, thinking about how it took a full month just to get here, but now his new life can actually start. Then he notices something off. The carriage suddenly slows down to a crawl, making Gauche wonder what happened or if there's some kind of trouble ahead. Up ahead at the city entrance, a crowd of people is gathered around the guards. Something is clearly blocking the way. Gauche looks on as the driver suddenly covers his face, gagging and yelling about some kind of nasty smell hitting them. Realizing the line isn't moving anytime soon, Gauche decides he's not waiting around and starts hopping out of the carriage. The driver tries to tell him they haven't even reached the station yet, but Gauche just starts running, saying this is close enough for him. He keeps up a steady pace while digging through his gear, trying to remember exactly where he tucked away a specific item. It's a magic bag that's been worked on to hold way more than it looks, basically like having a giant warehouse in a small pouch. Gauche finally digs out the item he was looking for, unwrapping a sword named Seppa and saying he found it. The sword immediately starts talking, greeting him as its master, but it's clearly got an attitude. It starts listing the exact time it spent sealed away down to the second, leaving Gauche looking completely exhausted as the sword keeps counting every passing minute. As he runs toward the city gate, Seppa keeps complaining about being tucked away without a word and reminds him it's actually a holy sword, but Gauche just tells it he'll listen to the whining later. He recognizes the problem at the gate as the curse of rot, noting the smell of death means things are getting bad. Seppa asks if he can cut the curse, and Gauche says this is easy compared to the month of neglect he just put up with. Near the gate, a girl is crying and begging the guards to let her through so they can get help at the temple, but the guard refuses, saying that's exactly why he can't let them pass. The guard at the gate stays on high alert, shouting for everyone to keep their distance in case they get bitten. He points out that the people inside have already lost their minds and are basically just zombies at this point. Betty is terrified and begs the guard to do something fast before the infected turn and start a rampage. She insists that they need to get a priest to lift the curse right away, but the guard doesn't seem to have a plan, so her companion, Fal, steps in with a rotting face and tells her to stop, making Betty realize how bad he looks. She looks at him with wide eyes, completely shocked by what he's about to say or do next. Fal turns to the guard and tells him his only responsibility is to take down monsters and nothing else. Betty screams out his name, refusing to accept what's happening, but the curse has already taken its toll. With blood dripping from his mouth, Fal gives up and simply asks the guard to kill him. Betty collapses to the ground in tears, sobbing that she won't let him die before she does. Betty breaks down in tears, crying out that there was no point in running so far if this was how it ended. The guard looks away as he draws his sword, begging for forgiveness before he's forced to end Fal's life. But just as the blade drops, Ghosh jumps in and blocks the strike with his own weapon, stopping the guard cold. He stands over the two of them with total confidence, telling the guard he's about to fix his rude behavior for good. Ghosh grabs onto Fal's shoulder and looks him right in the eye, warning him that things are about to get a little painful. The guard is stunned and Betty loses it, screaming at Ghosh to find out what he thinks he's doing to her friend. He doesn't even flinch at her yelling, just telling her to relax because the whole thing will be over before she knows it. Inside Fal's body, Seppa identifies the exact spot of the infection, showing a dark curse wrapped around the man's heart. The sword reports back that the curse has been completely cut away, and Ghosh just gives a quiet nod in response. Betty immediately lunges forward and hugs Fal, calling out his name as the tension finally starts to break. Fal looks up with a weak smile and apologizes to Betty for making her worry so much, but he jokes that it'll be a while longer before he meets his maker. Ghosh starts walking away, telling Seppa she did a great job and he won't reseal her until bedtime. Seppa is thrilled, calling her master the most generous guy ever since she finally gets some fresh air. Ghosh just shrugs it off, saying she did all right more or less. Seppa doesn't care, she's ready to talk his ear off about everything she's been holding back. Betty runs up and calls out to him, saying she has no idea how she could ever thank him for saving Fal's life. Ghosh just rubs his neck and acts like it was nothing, but Betty is totally starstruck, staring at him and asking if he's some kind of messenger sent from God. Ghosh thinks to himself that this is getting way too dramatic and these two are going to be a total headache. He tells her he's just a craftsman and quickly hands the travel permit back to the guard. Ghosh hands over the permit and tells the guard it's no problem, so the guard admits he's grateful because it saved him from having to kill anyone today. He looks at Ghosh closely and asks who he really is, maybe a wandering priest or something. Ghosh just looks back with a smirk and repeats that he's just a craftsman. Then he makes his way into Ortiz, a massive place known as the Dungeon City. Walking up the stone steps, he figures opening a workshop now is impossible, so he'll just gather materials and cash instead. The city doesn't actually have a dungeon inside it, but there are plenty of them nearby. Ghosh mentions he used to be an adventurer, while Seppa keeps trying to get his attention. He thinks re-registering as an alchemist should be easy, and ignores Seppa's shouting to check a map, searching for the location of the workshop. Ghosh finally snaps and tells Seppa to shut up, calling her a chatty piece of trash for talking way more than a normal artificial spirit should, and he asks why she has to be so loud. Seppa argues back that it's only because he's purposely pretending not to hear her, but she warns him that ignoring her will ruin his luck, even asking if he wants to step in dog crap. Ghosh isn't buying it and reminds her that her only real power is cutting through magic and curses. Seppa disagrees and explains that since she's a life form born from the dragon vein, she shares the same mana as luck spirits, meaning she definitely has the power to change his fortune. Ghosh just sighs and tells her he's 100% sure that isn't a thing, feeling like he's going to lose his mind if she doesn't stop talking inside his head. So he gives in and gives her permission to just materialize and show herself already. Seppa starts kissing up to Ghosh, calling him a brilliant master and insisting she has to sing a few hundred songs in his honor. But Ghosh shuts her down immediately, telling her to just hurry up and stop being so annoying. A bright light fills the area as Seppa finally takes her physical form. She pouts at him, acting offended that he doesn't want to hear her performance. Ghosh tells her she can stay like that, but she needs to keep the talking to a minimum. Seppa ignores him and starts checking out the surroundings, mentioning how the town is great because it's damp and dark like a dungeon, which makes her think there might be wild monsters hiding in the shadows. She notices Ghosh looking at her and gets a smug look on her face, teasing him by asking if he was staring at her body with gross thoughts, promising to keep his dirty fantasies a secret. The constant teasing is clearly getting to Ghosh, and he finally snaps, telling Seppa she is being way too annoying. Seppa doesn't seem to care and starts explaining how artificial spirits work, saying the more personality they have, the stronger their powers get. She gets a big smile on her face and tells him she's going to take his frustration as a compliment, even thanking him for it. Ghosh has had enough and just flicks the tiny spirit, sending her flying through the air while she lets out a loud yell. As she clings to his shoulder crying, he tells her that since her body is made of magic, she shouldn't really be feeling any actual pain. The two of them eventually make it to their destination, standing right in front of a sturdy-looking wooden door. Seppa looks up at the building and asks what this place is supposed to be. Ghosh mentions it belongs to an old friend of his. They walk up to the entrance, but Seppa notices a sign hanging on the door reading out that the shop is closed for the day. Ghosh is confused since it's still really early in the morning, but Seppa just figures it might be the owner's regular day off. Something feels off to Ghosh though. He looks at the entrance and wonders why anyone would need this many offensive magic barriers set up. Ghosh looks at all the crazy traps and wonders if someone is legit trying to kill his friend. He starts banging on the door, shouting for the puppet witch to see if she's even home, but nothing happens, so he figures she might be out, even though she usually hides from the sun. Seppa gets a bit creeped out and asks if this friend is actually a zombie or something, when a voice from the shadows tells them they've got the wrong person. Ghosh spins around, saying he knew someone was lurking nearby. A maid with a totally blank stare steps out and asks who the hell they are. Seppa picks up on a weird vibe, immediately yelling out that the woman is actually an automaton. Ghosh doesn't seem surprised at all, explaining that she has a spirit inside her just like Seppa does. Seppa can't believe what she's hearing, while the maid's eye starts glowing as she runs a magic scan on Ghosh to see if he's legit. Once the scan finishes, she calls him Lord Blood Oslo and tells him it's been over 7 years since they last saw each other. Ghosh remembers her now, calling her Maria, and tells her to go let her boss know that Blood is finally here. Maria stands there looking pretty drained, handing something over while explaining her master is busy. But Ghosh isn't having it and says he'll just let himself in, asking what she even means by not yet. The maid realizes she can't stop him, so she just sighs and tells him she'll lead the way instead. They head down a long stone spiral staircase together, descending deeper into the workshop until they finally find the puppet witch working at a desk. Ghosh greets her, saying it's been a while. Seppa spots the woman and leans in, whispering to Ghosh to ask if that tiny person is really her. Ghosh tells her she's a half-elf who's easily over 100 years old, warning Seppa to never bring up her age. He keeps going, casually mentioning to the sword that the woman standing there is actually her birth mother. The witch doesn't even look up from her work, just saying that Blood showed up at the perfect time, and she finally turns around with a tired smile, asking him to come over and help her out with something. Ghosh watches as the puppet witch tries to calm the situation. She tells him not to worry because there's nothing to be scared of. She gets straight to the point, explaining that she's currently trying to pull a soul out of the dragon vein, but it's not going well. The witch points out a tear in the spiritual flow that's making the soul panic and fight back, mostly because the soul is actually a part of her. Ghosh steps up and reaches his hand toward the glowing magic circle, asking if he's found the exact spot that needs fixing. He puts his hand over the light and starts working his own magic. The witch just watches in silence as the energy begins to shift. Ghosh sees the flow smoothing out and says it's finally stabilizing, which makes Seppa hop around and tell him how awesome he is. He gives a little smirk while mentioning that despite his looks, he actually knows his way around being a mage. With one final push, the witch captures the spirit in a small glass bottle and cheers. She's finally finished the job. She wipes the sweat off her face and says they're safe for now, then thanks him for the assist before trailing off. Suddenly it hits her, and she looks at him totally confused, asking why the hell he's even at her place right now. Ghosh looks pretty annoyed as he asks her if she's seriously just now figuring out why he's visiting, while the witch just hides a little laugh behind her hand like she's having a great time. She says she finally gets the story. He basically destroyed the workshop master's ego and then walked out, which is honestly just classic Ghosh. She tells him she's glad to see he's the same as always, then she turns her attention to the little spirit, asking if she's Seppa the Sever before introducing herself as Camilla Ostrova. Camilla gives a little smile and drops a bombshell, telling the sword she can pretty much be called her creator. Seppa gets totally flustered and blushing, barely managing to stammer out a greeting to the woman who made her. She mentions that Ghosh has told her plenty of stories about her in the past, so Ghosh notices how weird she's acting and asks if she's actually getting nervous meeting her maker. Camilla calls her a smart and good kid while sipping her tea, then asks Ghosh how long he's planning to crash at her place. Ghosh casually mentions he's moving in since she's living there. Camilla completely loses it and sprays her tea everywhere. She tries to play it cool while Ghosh says he wants to ask her something for future reference, making Camilla turn bright red as she hides her face. She asks him what exactly he means by that. The guy clarifies things by saying he's actually thinking about opening his own holy sword workshop right here. He explains that while there are plenty of mages making spirits, the puppet witch is the only real choice for spirit arts. He smiles and says setting up his shop near her is definitely the best move for his plans. Just then, Seppa starts calling out to her master to get his attention because she really wants to know what his relationship with this woman is. Ghosh tells her they were adventurers together 10 years ago. He mentions they were only a team for a few years before he quit to become an alchemist. While he tells Camilla he has a favor to ask her, she's still a bit red in the face but asks him what's up. Ghosh explains that he needs a weapon because he's planning to save up some money by working as an adventurer. He asks if he can use a corner of the workshop for a bit, and mentions he wants to take an artificial spirit too. Camilla is screaming on the inside, but she manages to clear her throat and keep it together while telling him it's fine since she just finished her work. She only asks that he lets her watch him in exchange. The guy picks out the spirit from earlier and asks if she's really sure about giving it up, so she explains it was just for a guild request anyway. Since they only use them for tools, they don't have personalities. Camilla looks at the spirit in the jar and says the little thing would be much happier in his hands. So Ghosh smiles and tells her he'll gladly accept the help. Moving on to the workbench where it's clear that while these alchemists are called artisans, they're really just high-level mages at heart. Seppa watches as Ghosh gets ready. She comments that this must be their true nature. Ghosh gets to work and says he thinks he'll try applying a mana leakage spell this time around. He commands the spell to activate, using his magic power to fuel a really complex multi-layered magic circle. He starts with the steel base, holding his hand over the metal and telling it to take shape as the magic begins to work. The blade starts forming right over the magic circle as he goes through the process of forging the sword. He mentions that he's adding some extra materials to really boost the sword's performance, starting with a blood crystal slime core. Next, he grabs a chimera's mane to throw into the mix. Then he adds a silver dragon's fang and some warrior's ashes, while Camilla just stands there looking completely stunned by what she's seeing. To actually handle all that power, he explains he needs to use an artificial spirit with its own personality to possess the sword. But as he gets ready for that step, he admits that this part is actually the biggest hurdle for him. Ghosh decides it's time and drops the final catalyst into the center of the magic circle, triggering the end of the process. He lets out a long breath, saying it's been a whole month but things actually turned out great. Camilla starts clapping for him, mentioning how much he's clearly improved since they first met. Ghosh rubs the back of his head and jokes that Saltz's constant harassment back at the old place was actually decent training, which makes Camilla smile as she says she can't wait to see what kind of personality the new kid has. She adds that she hopes the spirit is calm and well-behaved just like her, while Ghosh thinks about how he used to feel too young to run a shop. Everything is finally coming together. All the hard work they've put in and the support from the friends he's made along the way is leading to this. Ghosh looks at his hands, realizing this is officially the first big step toward making their dream a reality. Just then, a faint voice comes from the blade itself, asking where it is, and Ghosh smiles at the sword, asking how the spirit is feeling before calling it by its new name, Rain. Camilla doesn't waste any time and asks the new spirit if she can materialize, while Ghosh just stands there looking a bit confused. A small voice from the sword asks if she's supposed to do it like this, and Ghosh notices a sudden change. There's a weird squishy sound effect as the spirit starts taking shape, leaving Camilla completely speechless. Rain finally pops into existence with a huge smile, introducing herself and asking the guy in front of her if he's her new master. She leans in close and says it's nice to meet him, while Ghosh is having a total meltdown, realizing his dream sword turned out to be a Jaru. Rain doesn't seem to notice his shock and keeps the energy up, introducing herself again as Master Rain, which doesn't sit well with everyone. Seppa looks on from the side, sounding pretty annoyed that the rookie is already trying to take charge. Rain just ignores the vibe and gives Ghosh a big hug, telling him he's actually way more handsome than she expected. Camilla asks what the heck she's doing, while Seppa just loses it, screaming about how this is supposed to be a legendary holy sword. Ghosh tries to process the chaos, thinking about how innocent and carefree she is, before admitting that she definitely has a very weird personality. Camilla starts breaking down the lore, explaining how all life eventually goes back to the circulating dragon veins after death, which is where artificial spirits come from. She says they're basically just chunks of that energy shaped into a pseudo-soul. She goes on to say that while normal spirits can be made from anything, the really powerful ones need to come from thick, dense stagnation, which Ghosh just shrugs off, saying he guesses that makes sense. Camilla points out that since the spirit split off from her, it's only natural she's got a weird personality and turned out female, while Rain just claps along. Ghosh realizes the creator's gender totally rubs off on the spirit, which explains why she's been acting so wild, but Rain has no clue what he's talking about. Seppa tries to get her to actually pay attention for once, but Camilla keeps going, reminding Ghosh that since she came from such a heavy source of power, his opponent is a real spirit. She gives a confident look and says she personally guarantees that the girl's performance is going to be top tier. Ghosh finally stops stressing and looks at his new sword spirit, telling her he's counting on her from now on. The next morning comes around and Ghosh finally makes it into the main city area, but he's already losing his patience because Seppa won't stop yelling about how massive the place is, and Rain is right there with him, pointing at every little thing they pass. Rain puts on this smug act and tells Seppa it's fine that he's clueless, then offers to show him the ropes like a good big sister. Seppa falls for it immediately and starts thanking her, while Ghosh just stands there wondering how his life got so loud. They stop by a fountain where Rain claims the water turns into wine if you toss in a gold coin. Seppa thinks it's the coolest thing ever, but Ghosh knows she's just making stuff up. She keeps the stories going, telling him about some crazy witch who shows up at the local flea market and buys every single item until the stalls are completely empty. The story actually works because Seppa gets totally freaked out, while Ghosh just stays quiet and lets them tire themselves out, until they walk past a regular stone statue and Seppa jumps, asking if the monster is actually dead or just waiting. Rain doubles down and tells him it's a gargoyle that'll jump him the second he looks away, which sends Seppa into a total panic. That's the last straw for Ghosh. He grabs Rain and starts grinding his knuckles into her head, reminding her that he told her to stop teaching the sword nothing but lies. Ghosh hits his limit and tells Rain that if she feeds the sword any more lies, he's going to seal her away on the spot. Rain panics and swears she gets it, promising her master that she'll be the most honest spirit in the world from now on. While Rain keeps crying in the back, Seppa is left spiraling, trying to convince himself he isn't actually a monster, leaving Ghosh to just sigh at the mess. Back at the shop, Camilla looks out the window thinking about how weird it is that Ghosh has no records or achievements, especially since he seemed like such a regular guy. She eventually just brushes it off, deciding it has to be a mistake in the system rather than something suspicious. Moving on, the group reaches the Ordi's 7th temple ruins, where Ghosh tightens his gloves and gets ready to head inside, and Rain can't help but hype him up, telling him he looks super cool in his adventuring gear. Ghosh tells her he isn't trying to be a full-time adventurer again, but he still needs to handle the basics because it's better to be safe than sorry. He pulls out the quest info to double-check the goal, seeing that they just need to collect some cores from things called blood crystal slimes, which makes Rain look over and ask what kind of monster they're actually dealing with this time. Camilla explains how the monster likes to wait in ambush on the ceiling, just sitting there until prey passes right under it. Then it drops down and uses its weird, shapeless body to wrap around them. She warns him it's the type that melts people with strong stomach acid to eat them, but Ghosh stays moving. Ghosh draws his blade and tells Rain it's time to get to work, and she's totally ready to go. He lets out a massive swing that shreds the monster instantly, leaving behind a small crystal core on the floor. Camilla asks what that thing is, so Ghosh picks it up and tells her it's a blood crystal slime core. He explains that when these monsters get beat, they disappear and leave a part of their body behind, which makes Camilla pretty impressed. Ghosh says they should keep at it, and Rain is having the best time. While they move, Ghosh can't help but think about how this mana leak is way worse than he ever thought. He realizes it's because these dungeon monsters are basically just solid lumps of mana compared to things on the surface. Ghosh looks down at the monster's remains, thinking about how Rain's power is actually pretty terrifying, since her ability to break down mana means even a tiny scratch is instant death. Camilla smiles and tells him he's basically a Grim Reaper, which makes him look a little awkward as they leave. They finally make it to the Adventurers Guild, and Ghosh looks up at the big building, telling the spirits they need to stop being visible for a bit. He stands outside the entrance and gives them a final warning to make sure they behave themselves inside. Rain sounds super excited to follow orders while Seppa gives a more serious answer, and Ghosh just sighs because he knows how they can be. He walks into the main hall and notices the place is totally empty, figuring nobody is around since it's still before noon. Ghosh heads up to the counter and tells the receptionist he wants to re-register as an adventurer, so she hands him a form to fill out. He takes the paper and tells her thanks, but as he starts getting to work, Rain and Seppa start bugging him immediately, asking him over and over what that weird board is in the girl's hands. Ghosh keeps it quiet and explains that the device is just a magic tool called a magic stone tablet. The receptionist explains that the guild headquarters in the capital keeps a magic archive, which is where they're getting Ghosh's info from, while some background history drops about the Third Great Human-Demon War that started about 20 years ago and lasted for a decade. Though the silver lining was that all that fighting actually forced magic technology to advance, Seppa chimes in saying that war was way before his time. And honestly, that tech is nothing compared to a holy sword like him. Rain just admits that all this technical talk is way too much for her to follow, So the receptionist finishes up and calls out to Ghosh using his old adventurer name, Blood Oslo. She points out that because he hasn't renewed in forever, he's gotta start back at rank F, asking him if he's cool with that, which just makes Ghosh stop and try to remember what his rank even was back in the day. He decides it probably wasn't anything important if he can't remember it, so he tells her he's fine with the demotion. The girl totally loses it, begging him to be sure because she's terrified he'll come back and file a massive complaint later. Ghosh looks pretty confused and asks if her boss told her to get his word on the record or something, but he moves past it, saying he wants to start taking jobs today and asks if she can get his card ready now, which she agrees to, leading to the registration process starting up as a voice from the terminal tells him to step up. When Ghosh finally sees the card, he gets a huge hit of nostalgia. Just looking at the thing brings back memories of his old days as a hunter. He notices things are a bit different than 10 years ago though, since these cards now have a special feature, so he calls out for his status to open. The screen pops up showing he's 25 and at rank F, but his ability value is sitting at a crazy high number, 11,068. Ghosh thinks the display is awesome, while Rain floats nearby and realizes she's looking at her master's actual stats for the first time. He plays it cool, saying it's mostly just basic info everyone knows, then points out a specific blank spot meant for older adventurers. Ghosh just stares at the glowing screen, thinking to himself that this magic tech is probably just a cleaner way of doing things than paper. He spots a section for life force that says it hasn't been entered yet, and since he needs that to rank up, he just decides to deal with it later. Ghosh decides they need to look at the requests first and heads over to check the guild's quest board, completing the paperwork at the counter before heading out to get the job done. Back at the desk, the receptionist looks over the old files and can't help but think about that one specific adventurer. The realization that he was already S rank at 15 has her breaking into a nervous sweat. She knows that rank is only for heroes who save countries, but the guy just laughed and told her he was a bottom-tier F rank. Meanwhile, the group finishes their work and manages to bag plenty of crystals for the quest. Ghosh tells the others it's time to head to their main objective, but Rain is already jumping around and telling him they should just go, clinging to his arm and asking if she wasn't totally awesome today, though he just tells her to get off because she's too hot. Seppa chimes in from the side, telling Rain she needs to stop being so shameless with their master, but Rain just snaps back that Seppa has known him way longer, and it's only been 2 days for her, so she's making up for lost time. Rain keeps clinging to him, saying she just wants to soak up as much of his master essence as she can while she has the chance, but Ghosh isn't having any of it, telling her to just get off him as he shoves her away. Rain starts whining that her master levels are dropping, though Ghosh tells her to stop talking about weird substances coming off him. So Rain just tries to change the subject, telling him they should just ditch the useless meat and get moving. Seppa isn't about to be left behind though, yelling that nobody cares about a pipsqueak spirit and they should just leave her, which catches Rain completely off guard, and she can't even believe she just heard the word pipsqueak. She looks totally offended, wondering how anyone could say that about her and her slender body, getting even angrier and saying that even if they're just traveling together, talking to her like that means war. Seppa doesn't back down at all, just telling her it's a total fact while mockingly calling her big sister, which leads to Ghosh standing there in a dark mood, telling the both of them that they seriously need to stop. Ghosh finally snaps and yells at the girls to keep it down and stop their constant bickering, which totally catches Rain and Seppa off guard. Once things quiet down, Seppa mentions that something just occurred to her while looking at their surroundings. She asks Ghosh what kind of dungeon they're actually in, noting how the carvings on the walls are crazy detailed. Ghosh tells her that according to the guild, the place is actually an old temple from about 1500 years ago. He keeps walking and explains that a specific religion used to worship here they followed Lactus, a god of abundance who people now call an evil god. Rain pipes up, saying that an evil god is a being that's pretty similar to them but also different in its own way, and Ghosh just agrees with her as they move deeper in, but Seppa looks pretty confused and asks what he actually means by that. He explains that artificial spirits like them are made by humans using small pockets of magic energy that got cut off from the world's natural flow, but evil gods are different. He's heard they were formed when non-human forces cut off that same energy, and then they grew by feeding on people's faith. He finishes by saying that even if they're called evil, these gods can be anything from dangerous to totally harmless, or even give out blessings. Ghosh looks up at the carvings on the wall and points out that Raktus isn't exactly a friendly god. It's definitely the harmful type, which leaves Rain looking pretty lost. Ghosh notices her confused face and reminds her that she's the one who asked for the history lesson anyway. The group keeps moving deeper into the temple, passing by massive stone pillars and more ancient writing carved into the walls. It feels like they've been walking forever, and someone finally asks if they've actually hit the bottom floor yet. Just as they're looking around, a sudden shout from the distance makes everyone jump, and Ghosh spins around wondering what's going on. Everything feels a bit more intense now. It makes you wonder what kind of crazy stuff is actually waiting for them down in the dark. Something crashes nearby, and Ghosh calls out to see what's happening as he spots some other adventurers looking totally panicked. One guy is shaking and yells that there's a skeleton up ahead, but he's freaking out because it's not just some regular pile of bones. He screams that the thing is actually holding a magic sword, which catches Ghosh and Rain completely off guard. Ghosh's expression changes as he processes that. He repeats the words magic sword to himself, looking like he's ready for a real fight. Ghosh notices that the rumors were right about undead showing up in this place. He's actually pretty hyped because a magic sword wielder is exactly what he's looking for. Some adventurer nearby starts screaming at them to get moving. He tells them to run now before the time he's buying for them is totally wasted. Rain looks over at Ghosh, sounding pretty confused as she asks him what that guy meant by buying time. She keeps the questions coming, looking up at him to ask what a demonic sword actually is, which leads into Ghosh explaining that when a sword is possessed by a vengeful spirit, you can just strip that spirit away, and then you've got the perfect material for a holy sword. He reminds her that finding stuff like this was their plan from the start, so he's ready to go grab it. Rain isn't feeling nearly as confident. She asks again about that buying time comment and admits she's getting a really bad vibe from the whole thing. Ghosh just nods, looking a little tense as he stares into the dark. He spots a shadow and realizes things are about to get real. The two of them stand there as the truth of the situation finally hits. Turns out that thing everyone saw definitely wasn't a skeleton, and a massive, armored undead warrior stands in their path, gripped in a dark aura while holding a heavy blade. Rain looks up at the massive blade and notices that the bones around it are completely covered in miasma. The skeletal warrior stands there, holding a tiny, injured beastman child by the shoulder like she's nothing. Rain can't believe what she's seeing and asks if that's really a beastman kid being held captive. While Ghosh realizes it's the curse of rot, the shadow they saw earlier was actually this child, and the curse has already spread a ton. Rain screams as the undead warrior suddenly slashes the girl right in front of them. Letting Rain call out to her master in shock, Ghosh just glares at the scene, calling those other adventurers absolute bastards for what they did. He's shaking with rage, realizing those guys used a little porter kid as a decoy just to save their own skins. Rain looks over at him, seeing how intense he's getting and asks if he's doing okay, but Ghosh just tells her he's fine and that she needs to keep her eyes locked on the enemy right in front of them. Rain starts to argue, but they look down to see the child on the ground, barely moving as she tells them to just run. The beastman girl lies on the cold floor, barely hanging on as she lets out a tiny, pained groan. Rain and Camilla both scream for Ghosh to do something, so he yells back that they can still save her. Camilla is shocked when Ghosh makes a wild claim. He says he's going to drop that skeleton in 5 seconds flat. Seppa gets totally fired up by the plan, telling Ghosh to just handle the fighting while he takes care of all the mana. The air gets heavy as Ghosh starts infusing his blade with magic, catching the skeleton completely off guard. He doesn't waste a moment and charges across the room while the skeleton tries to ready its dark blade. In a flash, Ghosh connects with a massive strike that tears right through the undead warrior's body. As the dust settles, Seppa admits that watching Ghosh's sword skills is honestly impressive every single time, but she quickly turns to Rain, acting like a proud big sister before telling the spirit to stop spacing out since she's up next. Rain tells her master not to underestimate her power, and Ghosh just nods, knowing exactly what she's capable of doing. Ghosh looks down with a calm expression and tells the spirit she did a great job. He immediately moves over to the beastman girl to check her condition after the mess. While looking closely at her, he tells the girl to just hang in there a bit longer. He starts treating the bloody wounds, focused on keeping her alive while the area stays quiet. Rain watches him work with a worried look on her face and softly calls out to him. Ghosh explains that he successfully cut through the curse, but things still look pretty rough. Seppa tells him that what he's doing is impossible even for someone like him, but he just tells her not to stress it. He stands up and notes that they've finally finished what they actually came here to do. Rain asks if the kid is actually going to be alright as Ghosh picks her up to carry her out. He says she probably just passed out from using too much mana, though there's still a bit of a catch. Ghosh looks at the injury and realizes the bleeding is getting way out of hand, making him admit that the kid is definitely not in good shape right now. He knows they're low on time, so he tells everyone they need to get back to town as fast as possible. The guy sprints out of the dungeon exit with the kid in his arms, wondering if he can actually save him. He reaches the shop and yells for the puppet witch, begging her to use her power to help. Camilla looks up from her work, pretty surprised to see him, and asks who the kid is. Ghosh explains he found him in the dungeon and says they need to start first aid immediately before Camilla steps closer, noting that it's pretty obvious the kid has already lost an entire arm. Ghosh tells her the rotting curse had way too much time to spread, even though he managed to cut the curse away. Camilla is actually stunned. She says it's a miracle the kid is even alive after his arm literally started rotting off. Camilla tells Ghosh he's as impressive as ever, but he just gives the credit to Seppa, making the sword act all smug about it, and then Camilla gets serious for a second, calling him by his nickname and asking if she can talk to him about something, so he asks what's up, and she just comes out and says she really hates dealing with trouble like this. Ghosh doesn't even argue because he knows her too well, he just tells her he knows. But he also knows that even if she complains, she's the type of person who will still step up and help out. Camilla blushes a bit and calls him totally unfair, saying she can't really turn him down when he words it that way, leaving Ghosh with nothing to do but give her a bit of a sorry look for putting her in this spot. Moving on, Camilla points out that there aren't any healers in this town who actually treat beastmen, so bringing the kid to her was the right call. She makes sure to tell him he really owes her for this one, and Ghosh is quick to promise he'll pay her back as she gets a mischievous look and asks if he wants to start paying back the interest on that favor right now. Camilla gives Ghosh a serious look and tells him to stop calling her the puppet witch, saying he needs to just use her real name Camilla from now on, so Ghosh says he'll give it a shot. But he's pretty confused and asks her why she's suddenly bringing this up right now. Watching from the side, Seppa realizes her master is totally clueless about what's actually happening between them, and Camilla just brushes it off, saying the guild was the one who gave her that weird title on their own without her permission. Changing the subject, she tells Ghosh to hurry up and lay the girl on the table while she orders Maria to start the preparations, and the maid is already on it. Ghosh carefully places the girl down on a magic circle, hoping for some kind of miracle as he asks if she can actually cure her, but Camilla doesn't sugarcoat anything and just tells him it's completely impossible. She reminds Ghosh that her magic works by summoning spirits from the dragon vein, and he just nods along since he already knows the deal, leading her to explain that while healing spirits exist, she can't just create something out of thin air if it isn't there to begin with. She points out that even a professional healer couldn't do that, and finishes by asking Ghosh if he actually expected her to pull something like that off. Camilla tells Maria to get the magic circle ready for spell number 12, and the maid just hands it over right away. She starts the process by explaining she needs to clean the wound and stop the bleeding first, even though the fire spirits she's using are going to be pretty rough and painful. The patient screams as black smoke starts rising from the injury, while Ghosh just stands there looking worried about the whole thing. Camilla checks the work and notes that the bleeding has finally stopped, but she's not done yet. She looks over to Maria and tells her to hand over the next item, which the maid does with a totally blank look on her face. Something in Camilla's hands starts glowing bright, and Ghosh leans in to ask what he's actually looking at. Camilla explains it's a shoulder joint meant for an automata. It was actually a spare for Maria, but she can attach it to a living person since the wound is still open. Ghosh is a bit surprised and asks if she's really just giving the guy a prosthetic arm, and she just casually says yeah, like it's no big deal. He gets a little nervous and asks if she's sure about doing something like this without even getting the guy's consent first. But Camilla just looks back at him and asks if he'd rather she heal it and then cut it open again later, calling him the cruel one for even thinking that. Ghosh gets flustered and tries to explain that's not what he meant at all. He thinks it over and decides that doing it now is probably the right move since the wound will heal faster if it's covered up. Camilla finishes up the operation and says that should do it, finally letting the treatment wrap up as she tells everyone it's done. The patient is resting easy now. Camilla slumps back into a chair and complains about her shoulders being stiff from doing work she's not used to doing. Maria shows up with some tea and thanks her master for the hard work, getting a small nod in return. The maid offers a cup to Ghosh as well, calling him Lord Brad, and he gives her a quick thanks while taking it. Maria explains that she heard coffee has a calming effect and thought they could really use some after everything that's happened. Ghosh tells her it's exactly what he expected from her, even mentioning it feels like a waste having someone like her here. But then he realizes the owner's life would probably just fall apart without her around to fix things. Seppa tells everyone to keep it down. While someone points out how the guy's room is a complete wreck anyway, Camilla takes a seat and asks Ghosh where he even found a little troublemaker like this one, leading Ghosh to explain that he's pretty sure it was in a dungeon, specifically the 7th Temple ruins, making him notice her expression, and ask if there's something specific that's bothering her about the whole thing. Camilla admits that even with all the usual trouble they run into, this kid is a major headache. She tells him to just take a look for himself as she pulls back the hair to show a dark mark, identifying the jagged symbols as a slave crest right there on the skin. Ghosh looks closer and asks if those are magic runes, admitting he has no idea what any of it says, so Camilla explains that just looking at the formula, the magic on this thing is actually really powerful. It's a spell that causes total body pain for any bad thoughts toward the owner, and even forces the person to go limp so they can't fight back. Camilla keeps looking at the formula on Rain's neck, saying the rest of the spell is just there to take away a person's dignity. Just thinking about the terrible stuff Rain must have dealt with before getting here makes her feel sick. She starts trailing off, and Ghosh notices she's acting weird, so he asks her what's going on. Camilla pulls the kid closer and looks at the slave crest again, noticing something new that changes everything. It turns out the magic on the crest is actually broken right now. Ghosh looks confused, but Camilla realizes what happened and mentions his holy sword. She asks him if the slave crest got cut at the exact same time he used the sword to slice through that curse of rot. A smile grows on Ghosh's face as it finally sinks in. He tells her that Rain is free now. Camilla is still worried though, wondering why a kid would be stuck in a dungeon or have a slave mark in the first place. She looks away, admitting to herself that she can probably guess what kind of dark history led to this. Camilla decides it's time to get the full story of what went down, and Ghosh just gives a quiet nod as they settle in. Camilla scoffs in disgust, looking frustrated that there are still people out there doing such messed up things. She starts ranting about how porters are supposed to be protected first, and using one as a decoy is just the work of total scumbags. The realization of how Rain was treated clearly hits Ghosh hard. He looks like he's actually going to be sick. Ghosh gets serious and asks Camilla if she thinks those specific adventurers were the ones who actually put the slave mark on her. He admits he doubts it. While they sit for tea, Camilla points out that slave markets haven't even been legal in the kingdom for a long time. She keeps explaining that beastmen slaves are crazy expensive even in other countries, way more than hiring a bunch of mercenaries. So there's no way the low-level adventurers around here could ever afford someone like her, even with a lifetime of work. Maria notices Camilla is already on her third glass of tea and asks if she's overdoing it, but the conversation stays heavy. They figure the adventurers either bought her on the black market or just happened to catch her after she escaped from somewhere else. Ghosh takes another cup of tea from Maria and agrees that the situation they discuss sounds about right. Camilla takes a sip of her own drink and cuts straight to the point. Asking him what he actually plans to do with the kid, Ghosh goes quiet for a second, looking down like he's trying to figure out the best move for her. He asks Camilla if she can watch over the girl for a while, at least until her arm heals up, and mentions he's taking the yellow armor too. His plan is to send her home if she has family, but if not, he wants to help her get set up as an adventurer. Camilla gives him a little smile and says that's fine with her, especially since she was already planning on keeping the girl around until her shoulder and the new parts were fully fused together anyway. She pivots the conversation, asking if he's still going through with his plan to open up a workshop right here in town. Ghosh doesn't hesitate for a second and tells her that of course he's still doing it. So Camilla leans in with a smirk and gives him his very first official job, making a new prosthetic arm for the girl. Ghosh holds up his hands and clarifies that just so everyone is on the same page, he isn't actually a magic tool engineer, and he suggests that for a prosthetic arm, it might be easier to just use one from an automaton instead. Camilla looks at him like he's an idiot and explains that a regular automaton arm won't move if it's attached to a living person, asking if he really didn't know that, which leaves Ghosh looking pretty embarrassed as he mumbles that he had no way of knowing those specifics. Camilla gets serious, reminding him that she's a spirit arts user and a tool maker who knows exactly how to shape spirits into the right forms, like forming artificial nerves so the tool can actually connect to a human body. But Ghosh stops her right there as he suddenly realizes the implications of what she's suggesting. He asks her flat out if she's talking about human experimentation, which catches her completely off guard. Ghosh starts spiraling, thinking about how messing with humans and magic is a massive taboo, but he wonders if using an artificial spirit changes the rules, while Camilla just gets annoyed and demands to know if he's doing the job or not. Camilla calls out to Ghosh using his fake name and asks if he's really okay with making a young girl live out her whole life with only one arm. She points out how much the kid will struggle as an adventurer and mocks him, saying how pitiful it is. She claims she doesn't want to see the child in danger either, and that's exactly why she's putting the pressure on him to work hard. Camilla hands over a document and says the first thing they need to do is get materials, showing she's already got the whole list ready. Ghosh just stands there thinking about how this woman really is a total witch, but then the scene shifts back to the royal capital, where someone is absolutely losing it and slamming their fists onto a desk full of papers. It turns out Saltz is having a total meltdown in his office. Furniture is flipped, and papers are scattered everywhere while he tries to keep it together. He's shaking and dripping with sweat, mumbling about how there have been 10 different cases already. It looks like people are starting to notice his work is trash, as they ask if his sword quality dropped and if things are going okay. Saltz realizes this is the 10th official complaint he's dealt with since the day he kicked Gauche out, and things are clearly falling apart. Saltz is fuming, convinced that Gauche didn't just mess up his face, but must have done something to sabotage the entire workshop too. He looks back at the glory days and realizes these massive quality issues never happened when Gauche and his crew were still around to handle things. He slams his desk in a total rage, cursing Gauche's name while yelling about how the guy is still finding ways to ruin his life even after being kicked out. Just then Thomas peeks into the office to get his attention, but Saltz just loses it and screams at him for not knocking first. Thomas tries to ignore the verbal abuse and mentions a messenger from the Clodies family is outside asking for Gauche, though he mumbles that he actually did knock. Saltz's jaw drops as he repeats the family name in total shock, because the Clodies family isn't just any noble house. They're legendary figures in the kingdom's history, led by the current head, Aster von Clodies. He became a hero 3 years ago during the Great Demon Offensive in the Liguria campaign, where he faced down an army of tens of thousands of demons. He somehow held the entire line with only 100 riders, saving the whole kingdom. The backstory continues, explaining how the king was so impressed by Aster killing the enemy commander that he promoted him from a regular knight all the way to a margrave. Aster is just that kind of guy, the type of legendary figure who would have been called a hero in pretty much any era he was born into. Saltz starts panicking as he realizes the Clodies family is so influential that even the kingdom's 7th princess married into their house. He can't wrap his head around why people with royal connections would be looking for Brad. He knows they aren't just some old money family with deep roots. They're on a completely different level than the usual pampered nobles who just coast on their parents' names. Plus, they happen to be the most aggressive and combat-ready faction in the entire kingdom. The gravity of the situation hits him hard, and he realizes that if they screw this up even a little bit, they could all end up executed. Trying to stay calm, Saltz looks at Thomas and asks what this messenger actually wants from them. Thomas reports that a guest currently staying with the Clodies family has come with a specific request. They want to see a holy sword that was forged by Brad. He goes on to say that the guy is apparently a knight who managed to escape from the fighting in Liguria, which makes Saltz completely freeze up. He repeats the request in total disbelief, unable to process why someone like that is asking for a sword Brad made. Saltz is completely panicking now. He admits that he actually sold off every single one of Brad's swords just a few days ago and starts complaining about how he doesn't even get the hype. To him, Brad's work was always way too plain and clunky to be worth anything. In his mind, holy swords are basically just talking accessories that should look like expensive art, usually just for shows or ceremonies, so he remembers constantly nagging Brad to stop making basic gear and finally craft something flashy that actually looks good. He thinks the actual quality shouldn't even matter that much. Yet for some reason, Brad's stuff ended up with this weird cult following. Saltz knows he can't exactly go demand those swords back from the people he sold them to, especially not now that a high-ranking noble is asking, so he tells Thomas to just make up some random excuse and kick the visitors out right away, which leaves Thomas standing there totally confused. He orders the kid not to mention Brad's name at all and to tell them that Saltz isn't even in the building, but then he stops mid-sentence as a shady idea starts forming. He realizes there might be a much easier way out of this mess. He looks at Thomas and suggests they just take a random holy sword they have in stock and sell it under Brad's name instead. Saltz justifies his scheme by telling himself that even a margrave is still just a noble, and a noble would always pick something flashy over Brad's plain work. He smiles to himself, thinking about how he's going to use this chance to steal every single one of Brad's customers, call it a little payback for getting hit. He tells Thomas to forget about the previous plan because he's going to handle this personally, then yells for the kid to get ready as they head out. Saltz puts on his best fake smile as he walks into the room, bowing and apologizing to the visitors for making them wait so long. But as he looks up, he starts his usual professional greeting to welcome them to the workshop, only to freeze mid-sentence, looking like he's just seen a ghost. The visitor is a massive beastman who politely says it's a pleasure to meet him, introducing himself to the terrified workshop owner as Gaul. Gaul mentions he's only there because Count Clodies personally recommended the shop, and he's actually acting really humble and grateful for the chance to visit. Saltz tries to keep his cool while stuttering out the Lord's name, immediately switching into salesman mode to brag that out of all the shops in the capital, his is the only one prestigious enough to have served the royal family. He tells Gaul he's sure they'll find a sword that's actually worthy of him. Gaul says he's counting on him and reaches out for a handshake, but he grips Saltz's hand with so much power it practically crushes the guy's bones. Saltz forces a pained smile while telling Gaul it's a pleasure to meet him, but in his head, he's actually calling the guy an idiot for having such a crazy grip. He leads the way into the room and gestures toward the furniture. telling Gall to please come on in and have a seat on the sofa so they can talk. Gall says he'll take him up on that offer and goes to sit. But as soon as he drops his weight, the expensive sofa lets out a loud creak like it's about to break. Watching his furniture struggle, Salt starts panicking internally about what'll happen if the chair snaps. He's literally calling Gall an inferior former slave under his breath. He keeps the insults going in his head, thinking there's no way to know if a beastman actually made anything good and that there's just no way to tell. Saltz finally notices the girl standing there and wonders who she's supposed to be, just as Gall apologizes for taking so long to introduce everyone. Gall explains that she's acting as his attendant just for today, letting Saltz know that the girl's name is Alice. He mentions he heard that kingdom etiquette says a knight should always have an attendant when meeting a noble, so he followed the custom and asks if it's an issue. Saltz puts on his fake professional act and says he doesn't mind at all, calling Gall very polite while Thomas brings over a sword box in the background. Saltz sits there thinking the whole thing is a joke. He can barely keep from laughing at the idea of a beastman trying to play house as a kingdom knight. Saltz puts on a fake smile and tells Gall he has a very lovely attendant, and Gall just replies that he's honored by the praise, though Saltz is actually thinking about how the whole attendant rule only matters in places where you can't carry swords, so having her here for a business meeting is just a waste of time. He keeps the act going, mentioning that usually an attendant is some kind of apprentice knight, then asks Gall if Alice is just someone he knows personally. Gall gives a vague answer that it's something like that, which makes Saltz wonder to himself if the Clodies family ever bothered to teach these people anything. But then he remembers meeting the previous head of the family and realizing that guy was just as clueless about proper etiquette as everyone else. He hides a nasty grin while thinking that the people from that house really do just have muscles for brains. And since they're so stupid, he decides right then and there that he's going to squeeze every last coin he possibly can out of Gall. Saltz claps his hands together and says that's enough small talk, telling Gall it's time to finally get down to business. Thomas lets out a tired breath in the background as Saltz calls his name to get the presentation moving along. Saltz gestures toward the sword box and tells Gall to go ahead and pick it up so he can take a good look at it. Saltz shows off the new blade, calling it the latest Reiku model from the famous master craftsman Blood. Gall leans in to get a better look, recognizing the quality of the smith's work right away, and Saltz starts his sales pitch, explaining that the sword isn't just something pretty to look at. He goes on to say the name Reiku isn't just for show, since the sword's actual ability is lightning, and by wrapping the blade in high-level lightning magic, it can deliver a massive shock to anything it hits. Saltz even mentions the artificial spirit inside is a custom job from a top mage, which lets the user tweak the power output or even give it 10 different commands through telepathy, basically making it the best tech out there. Gall thinks it over for a second, admitting that while it's a little flashy, it does seem like a solid weapon. Saltz keeps the pressure on with a fake grin, suggesting Gall should pick it up and feel the weight for himself. But Alice starts laughing quietly in the corner, knowing for a fact that this toy is nothing like her brother's actual sword. Alice can't even help herself. Laughing right in Saltz's face, she asks if he's actually trying to make her die of laughter with all his talk. Saltz just stands there looking completely confused, calling out her name like he can't believe she's interrupting him. He gets a bit more annoyed and tells her he's busy negotiating with Lord Gall, asking if she could just be quiet for a minute. But Alice isn't backing down. She gives him a cold look and asks how much longer he thinks he can keep up this pathetic act. She keeps the pressure on, telling him to quit stalling and just bring out the actual holy sword made by Master Smith Blood already. Alice makes it clear that Gall didn't come all this way for a toy, he's here to find his real holy sword. Saltz finally loses his cool and yells at her to stop, claiming that as a simple attendant, she doesn't know anything about the quality of a weapon. Alice ignores his yelling and tells him she's done with the talk, addressing him by his full name, Saltz von Gestiberg. Gall tries to step in and tell her it's enough, but Alice shuts it down and says the whole joke ends right here and now. Saltz starts shaking as he watches her. Alice is suddenly holding a massive, terrifying black sword, and he can only ask what she is. Alice stares down at the jagged weapon, feeling the weight of it, and says she knows the truth because she can just tell. She looks at the black blade with total disgust, asking if this is really supposed to be Lord Brad's legendary holy sword. She tells Saltz not to be ridiculous, since a weapon forged by that man would never be a hollow shell that can't even manifest a spirit, and Alice calls him a fool for thinking she wouldn't see through such a cheap trick, standing her ground while Saltz completely loses it, screaming at her and asking if she has any idea how much that sword cost. But Alice tells the lowlife to shut his mouth as she suddenly draws a thin, silver blade of her own. And before Saltz can even process what's happening, he lets out a pathetic yelp and falls backward in total fear. He freezes up with sweat pouring down his face. A blade is at his neck. Moving fast, Gall finally draws his blade to put an end to the talk. His speed is unreal, like he's cutting away time and stitching results together. The Clodies family is known for having a super long history as a legendary warrior house, and people especially talk about the insane skill of the family head Estelle. Saltz is completely floored, thinking the guy has reached the realm of god speed while he just stares in total disbelief. But then the girl reveals the truth, telling him her name is actually Estelle von Clodies. She looks him right in the eye and says she's the 45th head of the House of Clodies, which sends Saltz into a spiral. He can't wrap his head around how a little girl could be the legendary head. He stammers through his confusion, asking what happened to Lady Alice and if she's really Lord Estelle. She just gives him a flat look and says she literally just told him who she is, but Saltz keeps pushing, saying the heads have been men for generations and she's clearly a woman. He's totally lost, asking what the hell is even going on anymore. Estelle stays completely calm and asks Saltz which one he thinks it is, but Saltz is sweating bullets, stammering that her identity is exactly what he's asking about. She just brushes it off with a smile, saying her gender is a trivial matter because there's something way more important. She points her weapon and demands to know where he is. Saltz is totally lost, just making confused noises while she keeps going, explaining how she even dressed up like a servant just to surprise him after 3 years apart. She's frustrated because she's looked everywhere, but he's nowhere in the workshop, and Saltz starts putting it together, wondering if the Clodies house and Brad actually know each other. Estelle looks around, wondering if he's just on a break or in the bathroom, but then the look on her face changes as she finally realizes he might not be there at all. Alice gets right in his face with a look that could kill, and Saltz just falls apart begging for his life, while Gall stays completely relaxed nearby. He keeps his eyes closed and calmly calls out to her as he asks if she really thinks it's a good idea to go around cutting down her superiors. Alice is clearly annoyed, but she shuts her eyes and decides to let it go for now, saying fine. Then she explains her sword is actually the one complaining. Apparently it doesn't even want to touch his gross blood. Saltz is sweating like crazy, stammering that the guy they're looking for was fired a month ago and isn't at the workshop anymore. Alice loses her cool, yelling about where her brother could be, but Saltz has no clue. Gall decides they're done here and tells her they have no more business at the workshop. Alice just stands there while Gall explains he only came for Lord Brad's sword, so he's heading out. As he starts walking away, he stops for a second and tells Saltz there's just one more thing he needs to hear. Alice stares Saltz down, telling him she has no intention of just letting it slide that he tried to lie to them. She reveals a magic stone and explains it's a high-end tool that records both video and audio. She gives a smug little smirk while saying that nobles always have some kind of trick hidden away, and Alice finishes him off by saying she'll be delivering her judgment on him eventually, leaving Saltz sweating and shaking in total fear. As they walk away, Gall looks over at Alice and tells her she really went a bit wild back there. Alice just puts a finger to her lips and smiles, saying she's decided to live her life freely and asking if he didn't do the same. The two of them head down the street as Alice wonders out loud where her brother is. She's clearly hyped to finally see him. In another part of town, Gauche is going over a mental list of materials for a prosthetic arm he's building. He decides he'll pick up the wyvern scales at a shop later since he already has the steel and slime cores ready. So first, he checks the board and finds exactly what he's looking for, saying he's found the right one. While Gauche is looking over a quest sheet, Rain suddenly pops up out of nowhere. She's all hyped up, shouting a greeting and asking if he's picked a request yet. Gauche jumps a bit, asking her when she even materialized behind him like that. Rain just brushes it off and tells her master to hurry it up. She's dying to hit the dungeon already since she didn't get nearly enough action during their last fight. She leans in way too close and tells Gauche she wants him to satisfy her properly this time, which immediately makes everyone in the guild hall look over. Gauche starts sweating, realizing the guys around him think he's whispering the context on purpose just to flex. The other adventurers start getting annoyed, telling them to stop showing off and take the flirting outside. They even start gossiping about Rain's outfit, wondering if Gauche is just into some weird stuff. Gauche starts panicking, trying to tell them that's not what's happening at all, but he knows he looks guilty. He even admits to himself that he'd want to punch someone acting this way too. Rain stands her ground, shouting that despite how he's acting, he's really just a holy sword, but her defense doesn't help much. Gauche tries to explain that while he thinks they're cute, it's more of a fatherly thing, so he definitely doesn't see them as romantic partners. He adds that their outfits are just based on their own weird personalities, but everyone just hears him making excuses and starts laughing. Gauche finally snaps and grabs Rain by the head, telling her she better quit playing around before things get worse, though it just makes the crowd judge him more. They start whispering about it being a lover's quarrel or wondering if he's actually some kind of creep, making the whole guild turn against him. They're convinced he's an enemy to women and talk about how someone needs to step in and protect Rain, so Gauche loses it. He starts panicking and yells that he's just punishing his child for being naughty, but Rain just makes it look worse by acting totally distressed. Ghosh knows she isn't actually fragile enough to feel pain, but for some reason, the spirits he makes are just too good at faking it. He stands there for a second as the realization hits him, this whole situation is a total disaster. And with that, the Blood Holy Sword Workshop is officially open for business, even if the start is a complete mess. People in the guild are already gossiping, saying they heard the owner of the new workshop is some abusive guy who attacks girls. And then they start saying it's the absolute worst, and there's no way they'd ever buy anything from a place like that. Ghosh is just standing there with his face in his hands. Honestly, he wouldn't want to shop there either after hearing those rumors. So he gets serious and tells Rain that from now on, none of them are allowed to materialize until they're actually inside a dungeon. Rain looks totally shocked by the order, and Ghosh can tell that for the first time she's actually legitimately pissed off at him. As she vanishes, the crowd loses it, screaming about how the girl just disappeared and wondering if she was just an illusion the whole time. One girl speaks up saying she knows all about that. Apparently, her mage boyfriend told her about magic items made specifically for guys who can't get real girls. The guys in the guild are stunned, thinking that the plain loser adventurer was just using fakes to look like he was popular with beautiful women. Ghosh finally snaps from all the insults and yells out a sarcastic apology for not having a flashier look to satisfy them. He walks away rubbing his head. He's learned his lesson the hard way and knows he has to keep his spirits hidden whenever they're at the guild. Ghosh walks along and suddenly realizes that one of his companions has been acting way too quiet lately. It clicks that someone must have been whispering weird things into Rain's ear, and he knows exactly who's behind it. He lets out a massive sigh, thinking about how every single holy sword he owns turns out to be a total jerk. Moving on, the guild receptionist asks if the current situation is more of that stagnation stuff while Ghosh thinks of Camilla. Eventually, they make it to the Yodo mine ruins where Rain starts calling for her master with a shaky voice. She looks around at the dark, damp cave walls and admits that the entire place just feels really off. And with a nervous look on her face, she asks if the ruins aren't just completely creepy. Seppa immediately starts mocking her, asking if she's actually scared and calling her a pathetic disgrace to all holy swords. Rain snaps back, pointing out that Seppa has been clinging to their master's cheek the whole time because she's the one who's actually terrified, but Seppa just acts tough, calling Rain a useless slab of meat and claiming she fears nothing since she can cut through any curse. Rain puts on a smug face and claims she's only staying this close to Ghosh so he won't have any blind spots, but Seppa immediately calls her out, yelling that she's just staring straight ahead and closing her eyes every time they turn a corner. Ghosh looks totally drained and asks both girls if they could just give him some space for a second. He leans against the cave wall to catch his breath, complaining about how incredibly muggy it is down there. It doesn't help that there are groundwater veins running all through the area, making the air feel even heavier as he realizes just how deep they've gone, with the heat and humidity both spiking the further they descend into the ruins. He starts chugging water to stay hydrated, and Seppa looks worried, asking if it's actually safe for him to drink that much at once. Ghosh just shrugs it off and tells her it's just a magic tool, which catches Seppa by surprise as she asks if that's really it. Rain jumps back in with a proud look, acting like she knew exactly what was going on the whole time, while she explains it's a spirit canteen with a water spirit inside that makes the water, leaving Seppa looking pretty impressed. Seppa starts freaking out, telling Ghosh that keeping one of the 4 great spirits trapped in a canteen is way too dangerous, but Ghosh just tells her to shut it and tells Rain not to take her seriously. He explains that it's just a standard magic canteen enchanted with stuff like capacity expansion, plus purification and cooling, making it a basic tool most adventurers use to carry a barrel's worth of water. Seppa isn't impressed at all and calls the whole thing pretty lame compared to the spirit version, reminding him that the great spirits are basically gods and shouldn't be compared to some cursed object. Suddenly she gets all excited, realizing she's actually the one who gets to do the fighting this time around. She can tell Ghosh is already bored of the conversation though, as he just stares off into the cave, getting back to business by warning her about acid snails that spit nasty mucus, so he pulls out a gift. He hands over a sword made of corrosion-resistant metal, saying that even if it's not a holy sword, it'll do the trick. Ghosh tells Seppa she's the star of the show this time and hands over the sword, thinking it's pretty cool that something he made a while back is finally coming in handy here. But then Seppa spots something moving and asks if that's one of those acid snails. The snail spits a huge glob of gross mucus her way, and she completely loses it at asking Ghosh if this is actually safe because she's really starting to freak out. Ghosh reminds her that since her body is made of mana, she won't melt, then asks if she's got this. She says she's on it and charges in, swinging the corrosion-resistant sword, except the impact is so hard she yells about her hands vibrating like crazy. Ghost shouts that the shell is too tough and tells her to aim right between the eyes, so she keeps at it, even though she thinks the whole thing is just super gross. Rain cheers and looks pretty proud of herself, yelling over to Ghost that she finally pulled it off, but Ghost sees something coming and panics, screaming for her to move immediately. Rain just stands there getting blasted by snail slime, and she starts losing it over how gross and sticky the stuff feels, so Ghost rushes over with a water jug, asking if she's alright while promising to wash her off right then. Rain ends up doing something weird with the slime, and Ghost just gives her a deadpan look, while she acts all shy, admitting she got carried away and asking if the slime look is actually kind of sexy. Ghost isn't having it at all. He tells her to change back to normal before he really gets mad. Rain turns into a chibai and snaps back, pointing out that he's clearly already pissed off at her. The scene shifts over to a shop with a potion sign hanging out front, where Camilla greets a guy named Brad, asking him how the material gathering for the shop is coming along. Ghost and Rain finally make it back to the shop and announce their home. Though Rain looks completely wiped out, Camilla notices how drained the spirit looks and asks if something happened out there. Ghost just says a little bit happened while Rain keeps groaning to herself, and Camilla says she gets the idea, so Ghost decides to move on, saying there's something more important they need to discuss. Camilla stops him right there, smiling as she tells him she actually has some good news for him, revealing that the young girl they've been looking after has finally woken up. The girl sits up in a strange bed, looking lost and probably wondering about her missing arm, but then Brad steps into the room, telling her it's nice to see her again while the others peek through the door. He keeps his voice calm, asking the little lady how she's feeling after everything that happened. To keep things friendly, he introduces himself and lets her know his name is Brad. Ghost introduces the group, pointing out that the redhead is Camilla the landlady while Maria is the one in the maid suit. Then he looks down and asks the kid for her name. The girl looks a bit dazed but manages to say her name is Stella, and Ghost gives her a smile, telling her it's a nice name and that it's good to meet her. Stella looks around at the cozy room and asks if she's actually in the kingdom of heaven now. She starts getting emotional, saying everything feels way too warm and fluffy for something not to be wrong. She starts crying as she remembers her master ditching her, convinced she died in that dark dungeon, but Ghost just quietly agrees, thinking back to a legend he heard from an old beastman partner. The story goes that dying on the surface sends your soul up to a kingdom in the sky, but dying deep in a dungeon traps your soul in a kingdom at the bottom of the world for eternity. Ghost looks at the girl and lets her know she's still alive because he saved her, then tells her they're in Ordes and she should just try to relax. He gives her a gentle pat on the head while she rubs the sleep from her eyes, and Stella finally processes it all, thanking him for saving her life. But then she looks down, looking a bit pained as she mentions there's one more thing. She starts to realize something is seriously wrong with her left arm. Ghost gets a real look of regret on his face and apologizes, telling her straight out that he wasn't able to bring her left arm back. Camilla watches the poor kid and tries to offer some comfort, telling Stella she needs to try her best not to lose hope after hearing that. Stella actually gives them a small, sad smile and tells Camilla that it's okay, acting way more mature about it than anyone expected. She explains that she remembers the exact moment the monster slashed her and how the wound started rotting right away, figuring the poison must have been insane. She even tries to stay positive, saying it's not Lord Brad's fault and that she's just happy to be alive at all, which is pretty brave considering the circumstances. Ghost looks at her with a lot of respect, telling her she's a seriously strong girl for being able to handle things like this. After letting that sink in, Ghost shifts the mood a bit, telling Stella there's something else they need to talk about. Camilla smiles at the kid and drops some big news. She reveals she's actually a magic craftsman and wants to build her a prosthetic arm. Stella's eyes go wide at the offer, but the reality of her situation hits her immediately. She starts panicking, saying she doesn't have a cent to her name. She quickly adds that she'll definitely find a way to repay Camilla for nursing her back to health, but then her voice trails off as she looks down. The poor girl admits she just can't afford something as expensive as a magic limb, looking completely defeated by her lack of money. Camilla leans in close with a gentle look, telling the girl she doesn't need to worry about the cost at all. While patting the girl's head, Camilla explains that this prosthetic is actually just a prototype, so she never had any intention of charging her for it anyway. Then Camilla gets this playful, slightly creepy look and says if they're talking payment, she'd rather just have the girl's body, basically calling her a guinea pig. Ghost gets annoyed and tells Camilla to watch her mouth, but she just brushes him off, telling him to be quiet for a second while she talks to Stella. He looks pretty stressed out, arguing that even if she's trying to test the kid's resolve, there have to be better ways to say it than that. Despite the weird wording, the girl takes it all in and quietly says she understands, ready to go along with whatever it takes. Stella looks completely serious, telling Camilla that her life belongs to her now because she's the one who saved her. And since Camilla was the one who pulled her through, the girl promises she'll gladly sacrifice her own body if that's what it takes. Camilla is a bit taken aback and thinks that's way too extreme, while Ghosh wonders if all beast folk have this intense warrior mindset. So Maria steps in and tells the two of them they need to wrap it up and let Stella get some rest. Camilla realizes she's right and the group finally starts heading out. Ghosh tells Stella to sleep well, and she gives them a polite thanks as the door closes. Once they're out in the hallway, Camilla shifts the subject, asking how the other guy is doing and if Stella is really going to be okay. Ghosh explains that his responses were clear and he could stand up just fine. It seems like the zombification didn't leave any permanent damage behind. Camilla lets out a sigh of relief, saying she's glad to hear it because she isn't exactly an expert on medical stuff and was actually pretty worried. She adds that she's more concerned about how he'll behave now that he's healthy, but Ghosh reminds her that this is the same guy who used a kid as a decoy. He says he doesn't think the guy will come looking for the girl, but he's going to keep an eye on the perimeter just to be safe, which Camilla agrees is a good idea. Camilla explains that it's going to take a bit more time for the girl's body tissue to properly settle, specifically around her shoulder joint. She tells Ghosh that the whole thing basically hinges on him finding the right materials, so she's counting on him. Later on, Ghosh heads to the local guild, where Seppa points out that the request board is looking pretty crowded today, and it looks like Ghosh expected as much from a place known as a dungeon city. He scans the messy board, noticing that the vast majority of the jobs posted are for taking out undead. He agrees there's a ton of them, while Seppa mentions that most of the dungeons in this area are just ritual sites, ruins, or catacombs. Since those places don't drop much loot, they're mostly a pain, but Ghosh gets the point. He finally spots exactly what he was looking for, a request for something called an ironclad spider. He pulls the paper down to check the details and sees that the location is listed as the Rust Spring Grotto. Seppa asks what kind of creature an ironclad spider actually is, and Ghosh tells him that the name pretty much says it all. He reads off that they have paralysis venom and can even block magic detection, making them nasty monsters that melt their prey from the inside, which actually manages to impress Seppa. Ghosh thinks back to how Camilla once got caught in a nasty ambush by this monster, remembering how their support was cut off and things got pretty miserable, which makes him realize that the monster's paralysis and melting abilities lead to some pretty suggestive-looking situations, and the commentary confirms just how weird it looks. He keeps his focus, thinking that without being totally prepared, even a mid-tier adventurer could end up in big trouble, especially since this thing is tough enough to wipe out an entire party in the blink of an eye. Ghosh figures that since Rain and the others are immune to status effects, they don't really have to worry about the venom, but Rain just makes a weird sound like she's choking. Rain starts frantically calling for her master, but Ghosh tells her to shut up already. Then she tries to warn him that something big is coming right before a voice calls out to him. A massive bald guy with face tattoos grabs Ghosh's shoulder and tells the rookie to hold it right there, leaving Ghosh feeling nothing but annoyed as he stopped. Looking at the guy, Ghosh realizes that this is exactly the kind of situation he's heard about in rumors, and it turns out he's actually being targeted for some classic newbie crushing, a fact that seems to fascinate him more than anything. He thinks it might be because he was just a little kid when he first registered at the guild, so everyone was actually pretty nice to him back then, unlike this guy. The tattooed guy smirks and tells Ghosh he had his eye on this target first, so he better not try snatching it unless he's actually looking for a fight. Ghosh just thinks to himself about how cliché that line sounded, but he plays along, putting his hands together and saying he'll take it as a compliment. He follows up by telling the guy he doesn't really give a damn, and even if he was picking a fight, he wants to know what the guy plans to do about it. The big guy just lets out a surprised sound, looking Ghosh up and down, then he says it looks like they've got a pretty feisty rookie on their hands. He tells Ghosh to listen up because punks like him always die young, and he shouts that for Ghosh, that time is starting right now as he throws a huge punch. The guy is completely caught off guard when his swing misses, letting out a shocked sound, while Ghosh easily ducks under the arm and tells him to take this. Ghosh leans into it and lands a massive blow right into the guy's stomach, hitting him with so much force the air just clears out. But Ghosh is the one who looks worried, asking the guy if he's actually being serious as the massive man gets sent stumbling back from the impact. Instead of being mad, the guy just laughs it off and says Ghosh has one hell of a punch for a rookie, and he really likes the kid's backbone too. He stands his ground and starts cracking his knuckles with a big grin, telling Ghosh that they're definitely going to go all out today. Ghosh just smirks and says you bet, telling the guy he's going to kick his ass and snatch that request, making it clear he's not backing down, so Seppa starts cheering him on from the sidelines, telling her master to go for it, and yelling for him to take down that weird old guy right now, while Rain watches the whole scene and thinks to herself that at this rate, she can't even tell which one of them is supposed to be the villain. The two of them get right in each other's faces. yelling and getting ready to turn the guild into a total war zone, but before they can swing, a massive voice booms through the entire hall, telling the both of them to just cut it out, and the authority in the tone stops everyone cold. The big guy's face goes pale and he starts sweating, looking totally terrified, as he stammers out a greeting to someone he calls Big Sis Foul. Ghosh gets slammed down, ending the fight as he hits the floor hard. Foul sighs and tells Geese that he's honestly hopeless, and this is exactly what happens the moment she looks away, while Ghosh just tries to clear his head. She turns around to check on Ghosh, starting to ask if he's hurt, but she stops mid-sentence the second she sees his face clearly. She stands there staring at him like she's seen a ghost, asking if it could really be him, leaving Ghosh standing there wondering what the hell is going on. Foul is completely stunned as she stares at Ghosh, her face turning red while she realizes something huge. She wonders if he's actually the same guy who saved her life back in the day, and the big guy Geese immediately drops his head, begging for forgiveness. He keeps apologizing and says he had no idea he was messing with the person who saved his boss's life. Foul offers her own apologies for the scene, and Betty pipes up too, saying she's sorry their friend was so incredibly rude to him, while Geese stays face down on the table. Foul explains that Geese used to be a mercenary, so he's a bit rough around the edges, but she promises that under the tattoos, he's a good guy with a strong sense of justice. She figures he was just trying to give the new guy a warning about how dangerous things are, and asks Ghosh if he can find it in his heart to forgive him just for her sake. Seppa isn't buying it at all, yelling that the guy totally picked a fight on purpose because Ghosh looked like a pushover. But then Rain chimes in, reminding Ghosh he was actually shaking the whole time. Ghosh gets pretty annoyed by the comment and sarcastically apologizes for looking like such a weak target, but he decides to just let the whole thing go. He tells the group not to sweat it anymore, especially since he ended up hitting Geese pretty hard during their little scrap anyway, so things are even now. The whole group sits down together at a table, and Ghosh says he's just glad the big guy is feeling better, which Foul says she really appreciates hearing. Moving on, Foul gets a bit more serious and addresses him as Lord Brad, asking him if he's currently traveling with any companions or if he's just out here on his own. Ghosh looks down at his drink and admits he isn't really traveling with anyone right now, making it the perfect time for Foul to bring up their plan. She explains they're aiming to take down an undead monster in the deep layers of the 7th Temple ruins, but the problem is it uses rotten curses, and none of them can actually dispel that kind of magic. She says she feels bad asking a newcomer for help, but asks if he'd join their party anyway. Ghosh takes a slow sip of his drink, thinking back to a hooded skeleton he saw recently and casually mentions he already took care of that thing the other day. He pulls out a blade to show them, explaining that the weapon in his hand is actually the monster's magic sword. The whole group goes quiet staring at the weapon, and Foul realizes it's definitely the one the skeleton was holding. Betty looks confused and asks if the guy who told them they were dealing with a high-tier variant was just lying. But Foul is dead serious as she says she recognizes the sword and there's no mistake. Foul looks completely stunned, asking if he's actually serious about having killed it already. She can't believe the monster they were so worried about was actually that easy for him, making her feel pretty useless. She stares down at the table and mumbles that her whole reason for being here is basically gone now, and seeing her get that depressed makes Ghosh feel kind of guilty. He admits he feels bad for taking her target, which makes Foul jump in surprise before she starts freaking out. She tells him to just forget what she said and that it was a total slip of the tongue. She insists she's actually happy he handled it, even though she admits she's a little bitter about it. She explains she didn't really have a grudge against the thing, but she really wanted to be the one to land the final blow herself. Ghosh listens to her vent and then comes up with an idea, asking if she'd be down to help him out with a request he has instead. He casually mentions he was just about to head out to hunt an armored spider, but as soon as the name drops, both Foul and Betty lose it. They scream at him, asking if he was seriously planning on taking on something as crazy as an armored spider all by himself. So Ghosh tries to calm them down, explaining it's not just him, technically it's one guy and 2 holy swords. He tells them to stop looking at him like he's got a death wish, but Foul just goes quiet and thinks about the monster he mentioned, looking like she's weighing the risks of a job that dangerous. Foul suddenly switches gears and insists they have to take the job since it's coming from their benefactor. She's not letting this chance go, but Geese and Betty are completely losing it. They can't believe she's actually agreeing to this, especially since she starts acting all heroic, telling Betty that this is basically a divine trial meant to make them stronger. Foul's really selling it, saying that there's no way they can back down now. She looks so cool that Geese and Betty are actually starting to buy into the hype, but then Ghosh kills the vibe immediately. He reminds her with a totally blank face that he's the one who gave her the request in the first place, so the group finally gets serious. Geese mentions their squad is going to be hitting the deepest part of that same dungeon. They've got their own business to handle down there. Betty sounds hyped as she suggests they take on the ogre centipede request while they're at it, and Fal looks over at Ghosh to confirm the details. She tells him it's officially a joint mission to hunt ironclad spiders and says they're counting on him, which gives Geese an opening to talk some trash. He looks at Ghosh with a smug grin and calls him a rookie. Clearly he hasn't forgotten about getting hit earlier. He challenges Ghosh to a contest to see who can kill more spiders, because there's no way he's letting that punch slide. The guild receptionist apologizes to Ghosh about how Geese is acting, explaining that the guy just won't stop pestering people once he gets started. She asks if Ghosh can just find it in him to go along with it for now, so Ghosh looks pretty relaxed about the whole thing. He says he doesn't really mind taking the bet, but he has one small problem with how they're going to do it. While Rain is in the back getting hyped for a fight, Ghosh points out that the guild will flag them if they overhunt the area. He suggests they just race to see who can bag 10 of them first, and Geese locks in with a serious look on his face. He says if that's how it's going to be, he guess he's got no choice but to do this, but the guy can't help but talk a little trash. He brags that he might end up hunting every single one himself and won't even need 30 minutes to get it done. He asks Ghosh if he's really okay with that, but Ghosh doesn't look worried at all. He says that's fine by him and just confirms the rules. The contest starts the second they hit the floor with the spiders. Ghosh starts heading toward the dungeon floor while Rain cheers him on, yelling for her master to go get them, and Geese just watches him go with a smug look. He tells Ghosh not to come crying to him later when things don't go his way, but cut to 10 minutes later, and Geese is completely losing his mind. He's staring at the scene in front of him, sweating and saying there's no way this is actually happening because he's looking at a dead monster on the ground. He points out that it was a C-rank creature, and he can't believe Ghosh took the thing down in only 10 minutes. Ghosh looks pretty satisfied with how things went. He mentions to himself that he hasn't gotten as rusty as he thought, and Rain is right there with him, getting all hyped up. She says fighting is a blast and brags that her little sister is definitely the strongest thing in the dungeon. Geese is absolutely losing it. He's sweating and looks completely defeated as he finally admits that he lost. The guy starts making excuses, asking if Ghosh used to be an adventurer because of the way he talks. He starts yelling that Ghosh is a fraud for not mentioning that from the start, but Ghosh doesn't even look bothered. He just tells Geese it's his own fault for assuming he was some new rookie. Rain pipes up and tells her master he's basically just using tricky logic, but she still gives him props since a win is a win, and that's all that really matters. Geese keeps on shouting, calling Ghosh a cheater because of his sword. He can't believe how cheap it is that the blade just erases stuff the moment it connects. Ghosh just gives him a tired look. He says he's not looking to die out here, so it's only natural to bring the best gear possible. That's when Fal finally steps in to shut the whole thing down. She tells Geese she knows it sucks to lose, but he's said more than enough, and she gives him a look that says she's not playing around. She reminds him that she's already warned him about acting like this before. Fal keeps laying into Geese, telling him that if he loses respect for his opponent, he's no better than a thug. She points out that he's seriously underestimating Ghosh's actual skill, and she goes on to say that anyone watching could see Ghosh is clearly an expert. She sighs because Geese is always acting out like this, but the guy finally snaps and tells her he gets it already. He looks completely drained from the lecture, and he starts admitting that he actually knows he's the one who's lacking. He looks pretty pathetic standing there, but he just keeps going, saying he was mostly just talking trash because he was bitter about losing. He's totally owned up to it now, so their teammate steps in to be the nice one. She tells Geese not to be so hard on himself and that Fal probably didn't mean to be that mean, and watching them interact makes Ghosh realize something. He thinks to himself that despite the chaos, they're actually a really well-balanced group, and suddenly Geese is all friendly, throwing an arm around him. He confirms Ghosh's alias and admits that he's actually pretty impressed with him. Ghosh just gives him a small smile and says he thinks it was a solid fight. It seems like the tension is finally gone, and Geese just grins back at him. He tells Ghosh they'll go with that for now, even if he still thinks he's a total rookie fraud. Fal looks ahead as the tension in the room shifts. She tells the guys that since the air is finally clear, the ogre centipede is finally making its appearance, and she keeps her eyes locked on the threat. She warns the group to stay sharp because this thing isn't going to be easy. The massive centipede monster bursts into view. Ghosh and Betty immediately spring into action, hacking away at its thick armor. Betty leaps high into the air while Ghosh stays grounded. They coordinate their strikes perfectly, eventually slamming a final blow right into the creature's head. As the monster hits the floor, Fal calls out to Geese, Betty, and Brad. She lets out a breath and tells them she's officially finished it off, but Ghosh is the one looking the most worn out. He leans forward, catching his breath while admitting to himself that the whole fight was way too close, and he just stands there for a second, sweating. He wonders quietly if that was actually the monster's last stand or if there's more coming. Fal walks over to him, looking a little shaky. She tells Ghosh she's sorry and thanks him for stepping in to save her again, so Ghosh just gives her a casual smile. He tells her not to sweat it, since looking out for each other is exactly why they took on a joint request together. Suddenly, Geese rushes over and yells for his sister, asking if she's all right. Betty is right behind him, panicking and asking Fal if she got hurt during the chaos. Fal catches her breath and tells the group she's totally fine, then says they should probably start pulling the poison glands out of the monster before she gets a serious look on her face, muttering that with this haul she can finally reach her goal, leaving Betty and Geese just nodding along quietly. Fal turns her attention back to the sword and tells Ghosh that his blade is seriously impressive. She asks him straight up if he found that relic in some dungeon, but Ghosh just gives her a little smirk and comes clean, telling her that he's actually the one who built the sword himself. Fal immediately loses her cool and gets right in his face, asking if he used to be a blacksmith and what kind of crazy magic he put on the steel. She begs him to explain it while Geese yells from the side that he wants to know the secret too, so Ghosh holds up the blade and explains that this sword rain is packed with special mana leakage magic. It's the reason why any monster it touches just vanishes into thin air. He keeps the explanation simple, telling them it's basically just a weapon specialized for wiping out monsters and nothing else. The whole group completely freaks out. Geese can't believe that rugged thing is a legendary weapon, while Fal asks him if he's actually been a holy sword wielder this entire time. Ghosh just shrugs it off and explains that he's actually a holy sword smith by trade, which makes Fal wonder why a master craftsman like him is even bothering with adventure work. The realization finally hits her, and she says it all makes sense now. He's only out here risking his neck to save up enough cash to open his own workshop in the city. Fal looks Ghosh right in the eyes and starts apologizing for bringing up something so random, but she's got a huge favor to ask, calling him Lord Brad as she drops the question, asking if he could actually forge a holy sword just for her. It's a total shift from just fighting monsters together, but the story fast forwards to this massive mansion that's so big it honestly doesn't even need an explanation. It's just standing there looking expensive, and while Stella is totally impressed by the place, Ghosh is sweating a bit. He didn't expect it to be this fancy. Rewinding back a few days to when they were first talking, Fal was being dead serious when she asked him for that custom blade. She makes sure to tell him that she's obviously going to pay for the job, and she's got more to offer than just cash since she knows he's looking for a place to work. She tells him that if he needs a workshop, she can actually hook him up with a location too. Ghosh is a bit surprised and asks if she's talking about a real mage-style workshop, not just some run-of-the-mill blacksmith forge. Fal nods and explains that her group Aldi's actually owns a vacant manor that's totally separate from where they usually hang out, and even though the building is a little on the older side, it's got a basement that would be perfect for a mage's workshop. Fal explains that the place belonged to a distant relative who passed away a few years back, and she tells Ghosh he can use the manor however he wants, suggesting it works as an advance payment. Ghosh realizes it won't cover the whole bill, but it definitely brings the price down a lot, making him hesitate a bit, asking if they're actually cool with him and Stella just moving in like this. Fal explains they aren't sticking around the city anyway. They plan to head out the second the sword is finished. Ghosh nods along and tells her he's down to take the job, but there are a few conditions since he's going to need about a month to get moved in and get the workshop actually running properly. He also mentions there might be some specific materials they'll have to track down on their own, but Fal doesn't mind at all, telling him to just send over the bill for any extra costs that pop up. With the business side handled, Ghosh gets to the point and asks what kind of holy sword she's looking for. Fal looks Ghosh dead in the eye and tells him she wants a holy sword specifically designed to kill a certain demon, and Ghosh just stares back, thinking about the look in her eyes while he considers how intense the request is. Stella asks if he's thinking about blood, but he just brushes it off, saying he was lost in thought for a second before they move into the house. Fal mentions how fancy the place is while Ghosh and Stella check out the huge foyer. It turns out the basement workshop is still a mess and needs a ton of work before it can be an actual shop, but the rest of the house is good to go, so Ghosh tells Stella they can officially start living there today. Stella loses it with excitement. She starts jumping all over the furniture and yelling about how fluffy the new sofa is. She grabs Rain and tells the spirit that this big place is basically their new castle now, and then she starts shouting about how they can make as much noise as they want without any neighbors complaining. But Ghosh has to step in and remind her that even in a place this big, there are still some limits to the noise. Camilla mentions how Ghosh specifically asked for an artificial spirit with the most stagnation possible, and Ghosh realizes the logic behind it. She looks him over, noting that making a holy sword to kill Nosferatu is a seriously heavy job for him to take on. Nosferatu is known as a high-ranking undead demon who led a massive monster horde to wipe out the Holy Kingdom of Liguria 3 years ago. But the nightmare isn't over since he still rules the capital today, leading an army of the dead where the living used to be. Fowl and Geese are both survivors of that war. She's the captain of the Order of the Dawn and Geese is her right-hand man. While it turns out Betty is actually the daughter of a concubine and the very last living member of the royal family. Ghosh thinks back on his meeting with them and realizes their intense attitude totally makes sense given their history. But there's a massive issue with this whole revenge plan. Since the guy is undead, hitting him with a regular sword won't do a thing. Standard holy magic is useless too because a Nosferatu is an immortal rather than simple undead, meaning only specific magic, curses, or poisons work even then. Things like fire, ice, or rot won't cut it, because the only way to win is with something that can actually destroy the soul. To actually kill a guy like that, you have to fundamentally negate his whole existence. The only way to win is to completely wipe out his soul. When you think about it, this whole problem might be a bigger deal than taking down Demon King Beelzebub, the one who keeps all the demon nations together. Ghosh looks down, thinking that if he uses rain for this, it might actually be possible to pull off. So he explains that magic and souls aren't the same thing. Even if someone managed to land a wound on her, she'd probably just heal right up anyway. He makes it clear he has no plans to lend rain out to anyone. And besides, he's pretty sure she'd just say no herself. Meanwhile, Camilla sighs, saying that the more she hears about this crazy request, the more she just wants to put her head in her hands and give up. She looks at him seriously and asks if those girls are actually just planning on going to that place to die. But Ghosh just tells her he knows what she means. He saw it in their eyes, and they looked exactly like people who knew what they were getting into. He's convinced that since they've accepted this path, they're going to see it through to the end and actually defeat the Nosferatu. Ghosh promises that they'll make it back safely, and he's going to make sure of it by forging a holy sword that can get the job done. Camilla gives a confident smile and says that taking down a target like that shouldn't be impossible, not when they've got both of their holy swords working together. Ghosh nods along, totally agreeing with the plan, so Camilla suggests they get right to work on it. Ghosh adds that he's going to put together a list of everything they need to keep the artificial spirit stable. He looks at her and tells her he's really counting on her help with this one. Camilla says she'll take care of finding and gathering all the materials they need, while Ghosh mentions he has to start mapping out the enchantment formula. She starts heading out, telling him they can go over the rest of the details over dinner, and gives him a final smile, saying she'll see him later. Once he's alone, Ghosh admits things are about to get really busy. He tries to psyche himself up to give it his all, but he's actually feeling pretty drained from moving around since early this morning. He realizes there's still 2 hours left until dinner. Suddenly, he hears someone call out Seperin, and he turns around to see what's going on. Ghosh decides he's going to take a quick nap. He tells the others to wake him up in about an hour, and Rain immediately gives him a thumbs up, saying Roger that, master. She says she understands, telling him to have a restful sleep while Camilla waves from the background. Ghosh groans as he settles in, thinking about how much he's been moving around all day. His body feels totally heavy, and even though he didn't grab a blanket, he's surprised by how warm it is. But he wakes up and loses it when he realizes Rain is fast asleep right on top of him. He panics and stammers that they must have just come over to wake him up. Camilla looks down at them with a smirk, asking if the two of them just ended up falling asleep together. She admits they both worked hard since this morning, especially Rain, since Camilla worked her to the bone, so she gives him a soft look and asks if she accidentally woke him up. Rain slowly opens her eyes and looks up at Ghosh. She gives him a warm smile and whispers good morning. Ghosh sits up and tries to keep things moving, saying he needs to get ready soon or they'll miss dinner. But Rain just clings to him even tighter, mumbling that she wants to stay like this. Ghosh loses it and yells. Rain looks up at him with these big, innocent eyes and asks what's wrong. Ghosh just stands there looking completely done. She gets even more worried and asks if he's doing all right, wondering if maybe he's actually feeling sick. Ghosh just looks away, thinking to himself that he's definitely feeling it in more ways than one. He tries to be firm and tells her she has to let go, but Rain starts whining, begging for just a few more minutes. He keeps telling her to drop it while he tries to pull her off, but he quickly realizes she isn't moving an inch. It hits him that an artificial spirit is way stronger than any regular guy. He keeps shouting for her to let go. Rain just buries her face in his chest, yelling that she just wants to stay like this for a bit longer. Seppa finally wakes up and sees the mess Ghosh and Rain are in. She just stares, asking what they're doing. Ghosh looks like he's about to lose his mind. He begs Seppa to help him peel Rain off right now. But Seppa just stays calm and tells him it's not happening, since she only has the power to cut through magic. She goes on to explain that breaking the bond between a human and a spirit is way out of her league, so Ghosh just has to deal with it. He thinks it's pretty harsh as he realizes he's definitely missing dinner. Meanwhile, Stella is in total awe because her new parts actually moved. she can't believe how amazing it is. Camilla tells her the shoulder is linked up now, so she asks Stella if she can try moving her fingers next. Stella struggles a bit and says it's pretty tough, but Camilla tells her that any movement at all is a win. She decides to test things further by touching Stella's arm, asking if she can feel anything from the contact. Stella just gives a big smile and blushes, saying the whole thing actually feels pretty ticklish. Camilla checks over Stella and says things are looking good, though the kid's senses are still a bit dull. Ghosh just watches as the inspection wraps up. Camilla explains the fake nerve network is already connecting to the outer shell, so the whole procedure was a total success. Stella stares at her new arm like she can't believe it. She asks if she can really use her left side again. Camilla tells her it'll take some practice to get the hang of it, but she'll be moving just like she used to before long. She goes on to say that the more Stella uses the fake nerves, the more they'll actually learn her habits, basically optimizing themselves to fit her perfectly. Stella looks completely blown away as Camilla promises her the power has been specifically tuned for Beastman specs, telling her she can relax. Camilla mentions she even added a crazy defense mechanism just in case Stella gets into trouble like last time. The kid just gives a quick nod. It turns out Camilla used a bunch of advice from Brad since he's a pro adventurer. He helped make sure the arm works in any situation. Stella is looking a little overwhelmed by all the features, especially when Camilla adds that the whole arm is fully detachable. Ghosh can only say her name in disbelief. Camilla finishes by saying she's going to keep extra materials around, that way she can fix the arm whenever it ends up getting trashed. Ghosh eventually has to step in and tell Camilla that's enough. She's kind of overwhelming the poor kid. And looking at the work, he can't help but admit that the spirit-infused prosthetic is actually pretty incredible. Camilla just gives him this look and asks why he's the one acting so surprised by the results, so Ghosh clarifies that he's just impressed by her blueprints. The designs she came up with were on another level. But Camilla isn't having it. She points out that even if she drew the plans, Ghosh is the one who actually built the arm. She explains that making something this sophisticated is way beyond what any normal holy swordsmith or crafter could ever pull off. She keeps going, telling him he needs to realize that being way too modest can actually come off as an insult to others. Ghosh just takes it in stride. He gives a little smile and says he'll just take what she said as a compliment. Camilla looks pretty proud of herself and tells him he better keep that attitude, especially since she doesn't just hand out praise to anyone. While they're talking, Stella speaks up and calls them Lord Blood and Lady Mary. She says she doesn't even know how to thank them for everything. Stella looks down all flustered and says she knows she promised to dedicate her life to him, but she has no clue how she'll ever actually repay him. Camilla tells her to stop already, but the girl tries to protest until Ghosh steps in. He tells her he isn't looking for anything in return, explaining that his prosthetic worked exactly like he hoped, so he's satisfied just seeing the results. He says he gets why she feels that way though, so Camilla looks over and asks Stella a serious question. She wants to know what the kid plans on doing once her body finally makes a full recovery. Stella mentions her old master made her register at the guild, so she's thinking about finding some work there. Camilla listens and asks what her current rank is, making Stella look pretty embarrassed as she admits she is only an F-rank adventurer. Camilla points out that she'll barely make enough to survive at that rate and asks Ghosh for his opinion. Camilla doesn't sugarcoat things and tells Stella straight up not to go dying once she hits the dungeon, since she wants to move forward with a new plan. She looks at the kid with a little smile and says they should get to work, asking Stella if she'd actually be down to help her out with the shop. Stella looks totally surprised as Camilla explains that honestly, it's a massive pain trying to run a magic item shop while also making artificial spirits. So even with Maria helping out, they're still way too short-handed. She looks at Stella and makes a real offer, saying she'll obviously pay her for the labor and even throw in room and board as part of the package. Stella's face lights up and she gets all excited, yelling that if that's the deal, she can definitely handle the job. Camilla says that's a big help, then mentions she'll have the girl do all sorts of tasks specifically to train her new prosthetic arm, which makes Ghosh smile. He tells Stella he's happy for her, seeing how well everything turned out, and the poor girl just loses it. She starts crying happy tears while thanking Lady Camilla and Lord Brad for being so good to her. Stella is totally fired up about her new job, shouting that she's going to give it her absolute best, but Maria stops her right there, saying they need to go buy some actual clothes immediately. Stella looks pretty confused by the idea, while Ghosh and Camilla just watch the two of them from the side. Once things settle down, Ghosh pulls himself together and decides it's time to get back to work for the day. It's been a few days since he moved into his new place, and his mornings usually start with some training at Camilla's workshop while she's still napping nearby. Even though he has his own workshop now, he'd much rather be doing his work there, but the problem is the place just isn't ready yet. Setting up a spot for holy sword refinement is a huge project that needs special magic on the walls and floors before he can even start. He really wanted his own space so he wouldn't be a burden on Camilla forever. But for this part of the process, he's just got to suck it up. He knows he can't just sit around though, otherwise his skills are going to get rusty. So he places his hand on the table and sets a goal to knock out 5 daggers today, focusing everything on the magic circle in front of him. Ghosh stands there at the bench looking serious and ready to dive into the work. Stella suddenly lets out a loud shout while leaning over the table, and it catches Ghosh completely off guard. He jumps back looking startled, but once he sees who it is, he just sighs and says it's only her. Stella starts to freak out a little, looking super worried as she asks if she accidentally interrupted his work, which Ghosh just brushes off with a smile, telling her not to worry because he was just practicing some holy sword forging. Stella just stands there for a second, quietly repeating the words to herself as the idea starts to sink in, and suddenly she completely loses it, shouting about the holy sword with stars in her eyes. She gets even more hyped and asks if it's the legendary sword that only talks to the chosen one, even wondering if he's actually a hero. Ghosh immediately shuts that theory down with a deadpan look, telling her that's definitely not what's happening here. He goes on to explain that maybe 10 years ago the swords actually chose their owners like that. But things have changed, and now he claims that pretty much anyone can hear the voice of a holy sword these days. Ghosh questions if that's really how things are as he examines the blade. Stella hands over the gear and says, "There you go." Suddenly the sword starts making these weird groaning noises, catching everyone off guard. It actually starts talking, telling Ghosh he's hitting the right spot as he works on it. Stella turns bright red and looks super flustered while listening to the blade, especially when the sword starts begging Ghosh to stop because it can't take any more. Ghosh completely loses his cool and yells that they are absolutely not using this sword, but Stella's actually loving the drama, shouting that this is way better. Stella brings up some orc sauté, which makes Ghosh feel sick just thinking about slime mucus sauce. The sword isn't helping either. It starts describing how gooey and delicious the texture is. Ghosh looks pretty drained after all that and apologizes to Stella, promising her that he'll make sure to bring something actually normal for her to use next time. He looks totally defeated and just asks her to let it slide for today. Moving on, Ghosh tries to change the vibe by asking her how she's settling and wondering if she's finally gotten used to how things work around the place. Stella cheers up instantly and says she is, even pointing out with a huge grin how she and Maria are matching now. She mentions her prosthetic arm is in great shape, then gets all hyped up, telling him she's going to work her hardest to be as helpful as possible. Stella looks pretty down and admits that running errands is way harder than she thought it would be, making Ghosh mention that both he and Camilla were actually worried sick about her, which makes Stella quickly chime in that she was worried too. To cheer her up, Ghosh says he's heading out to grab some materials and asks Stella if she wants to tag along, and Stella's eyes light up instantly as she shouts that she definitely wants to go with him. Ghosh tries to keep things under control and tells her to make sure she doesn't get lost or separated, but Stella is already half running off, calling back that she knows that already. Once they get to the market, Ghosh is impressed by the Dungeon City's selection, noticing tons of rare materials he could never find back in the capital, though he quickly realizes he's underfunded for a haul like this and thinks he should have brought way more cash. Before he can overthink his budget, Stella grabs his arm and starts pulling him towards some flowers, shouting for Lord Brad to come look at something else with her. Ghosh just gives her a patient smile and tells her to slow down and not be in such a big rush. Ghosh watches Stella for a second and thinks about how he was worried she'd be depressed after everything she went through, but she seems to be doing just fine. Actually, he gets curious and asks her what kind of beastman she actually is, noting that he thought she was a wolf at first until he noticed how rounded her ears are. He figures he should probably know for the future and starts to ask again, but he's cut off by someone in the crowd screaming about a snatcher. A thief in a hood tears through the busy market while people scramble out of the way, with everyone yelling for someone to stop him, and Ghosh immediately grabs Stella to pull her out of the way, shouting her name as the guy brushes right past them. Stella looks up at him while he's still holding her and calls out his name, but she has this look in her eyes like she's about to do something. Then she asks if all she has to do is capture those bandits, sounding way more confident than usual. Ghosh looks worried, but Stella tells him it's okay because her new prosthetic arm is telling her something, specifically that the arm is going to help her draw out her real power, and she looks completely locked in. Ghosh tries to tell her to stay put, but it's too late. She takes off like a shot, leaving him standing there in the dust. Stella launches herself off the roof without a second thought, diving straight down toward the street, leaving the thief completely clueless as he runs with the loot, while Stella closes the gap from the air, and Ghosh pushes through the crowd as fast as he can, yelling out Stella's name because he's worried, but she's already got the guy pinned to the dirt. She looks back with a huge smile and tells Ghosh the culprit is secured. Ghosh catches up and immediately starts checking her over, asking if she's really sure she didn't get hurt, since he's thinking about how he's the type of guy who just can't stand seeing people get hurt or letting evil win. But he looks at her arm and realizes that prosthetic is basically a cheat code for how much power it gives her. He knew the arm was going to be good, but now he's wondering what kind of crazy artificial spirit is actually in there. Ghosh remembers telling her that being an adventurer was impossible before, but seeing her now, he knows she can handle it. He watches her and thinks she's going to be just fine, even joking to himself that he can finally send her on errands. Ghosh looks down at the girl and calls out her name, catching her attention before he explains that he's got a special job he wants her to take on. A little later, Stella shows up at a big house clutching a delivery bag and gives a loud hello. Ghosh meets her at the door and asks if she had any trouble finding the place, while Stella hands over the bag, telling him she got everything he wanted. He checks the supplies and sees she got the order exactly right. She starts looking around the building and mentions how incredible Brad's place is. But as she stands there, she starts to notice something else about the house that feels familiar. Her eyes light up as she mentions the air in here has a really nostalgic smell. So Ghosh gets curious and asks if she was born in Liguria, but she isn't really sure, leading to Stella explaining that she doesn't know her birthplace since her parents always moved from one battlefield to the next. Stella looks around the room and mentions that for some reason, the house smells exactly like her parents, and Ghosh just nods and realizes that since she was born into a family of mercenaries, things are probably complicated. He thinks about how there's no way to know if her parents are even still alive, which makes it feel wrong to just ask her about them. So he decides to change the subject and asks Stella if she wants to stick around and eat some lunch with them. Stella gets all excited and asks if he's actually sure about that, and Ghosh just smiles and tells her of course she can stay. Just then, Camilla and Rain show up to say good morning, and Camilla immediately notices the little beastman girl standing there, but she's still half asleep and rubs her eyes, trying to figure out if that's the same kid they saw before. As soon as she realizes it's her, Camilla dives in for a huge hug, and Ghosh just stands there watching her smother the poor girl with affection. Later on, Maria finishes up some training out in the yard and asks Ghosh what he thought of her performance, leading Ghosh to admit it was pretty incredible. She just managed to pull off 8 strikes in a single breath. Geese starts yelling at the group, calling them frauds and demanding to know if they actually saw that entire combo, but Betty just shrugs it off, saying she wouldn't be able to do her job if she didn't understand swordplay. So Ghosh steps in and explains that he's seen plenty of swings like that before, and his eyes just got trained, mentioning how the power was incredible and the techniques were so fast they were basically Godspeed, leading Betty to clasp her hands together and agree that it's exactly like Lord Blood described it. She gets a dreamy look on her face and whispers to herself about how that's just classic Fowl, blushing, while she talks about how magnificent that swordsmanship looks every single time she sees it. Geese isn't buying any of it and asks if she can even see anything at all, but she just tells him no, explaining that you don't actually need eyes to appreciate how Fowl fights, you just have to feel it. Ghosh watches her and realizes the princess is completely infatuated, though he figures it makes sense given her strength. Ghosh watches the two of them and thinks it's a bit weird since they're both girls, but he quickly decides it's none of his business, turning his focus back to the job. He tells Fowl that he's finally got a good handle on how she fights and what her skill level is like, which means he's been able to get most of the materials for the new holy sword together. Though there are still a couple of items he hasn't found, Fowl looks up at him and asks if there's anything her and her team can do to help him get the rest of the stuff, but Ghosh turns her down, saying the last few materials are way too tricky to find, so he's just going to handle it himself. While they wait, Fowl nods and calls out to Agaliel, agreeing to wait and promising to spend the time training so her skills are even sharper. And then she closes her eyes and tells him that meeting a guy like him feels like some kind of miracle from above, even calling it an act of God, telling him to give thanks to the sun goddess, because the whole group is really putting their trust in him. To get this done, Ghosh realizes she mentioned God when they first met too, so he figures she must be a serious follower of the state religion back in Liguria. But then Geese pipes up and says he's counting on him too, because he won't be satisfied until he personally drags that demon king off his throne. Fowl looks down, her voice heavy as she asks Ghosh to give them the power they need to wipe out that hateful demon. Ghosh stands at the gate, watching as the group heads out on their own. The weight of the request hits him, and he realizes he's going to have to put everything he's got into this next transmutation. Thinking it over, he decides he has no choice but to borrow some extra power, even though he didn't want to bring anyone else into this mess. He heads back to the workshop, telling himself it's time to get to work. As he walks up to the front door, stepping inside, Ghosh calls out to Camilla, and she looks up from what she's doing to greet him. Camilla asks if his meeting is finally over and starts to invite him to grab some dinner with her, but he suddenly grabs her hands and says her name, completely catching her off guard and leaving her totally flustered. She starts to blush and stammers out his name, trying to get him to slow down for a second while he looks her right in the eyes and tells her he absolutely needs her. Before asking her to please go out with him, Camilla just stands there totally frozen for a second, then she completely loses it and starts screaming. Maria watches with a blank stare while Stella freaks out in the back, wondering if Ghosh is actually being serious. Camilla starts to settle down but looks pretty annoyed. She can't believe her first adventure in 10 years is starting like this. She complains about how she never thought she'd end up in such a total hellhole, while Ghosh just stands there looking awkward. The mountain they're heading to is called Mount Darren, a massive rocky peak that looks pretty dangerous. Ghosh explains that the center of the mountain is known as the Valley of the Corpse Dragons, which is full of dragon zombies. It's a restricted area that the kingdom's mage guild keeps a close eye on, making it a forbidden zone. Since Ghosh is basically a nobody to the guild, he needs special permission and a high-ranking mage just to step foot inside. That's exactly why he had to come to Camilla for help, even though the way he asked was a bit much. Camilla is still spinning and completely out of it, but Ghosh just keeps talking about how the location is going to be a real problem. Camilla and Ghosh share a quiet moment, but Ghosh can tell she's been in a total funk ever since they got moving. He starts worrying if he messed up somehow, while Camilla just stands there pouting and giving off annoyed vibes. Trying to break the ice, Ghosh brings up the Mages Guild teleportation circle they just used, and he gives a big thumbs up, talking about how great it was to get from Ortiz to here in like 2 seconds. He thanks her for making the paperwork go so fast, while Camilla admits that having those circles everywhere would be pretty nice. Ghosh gets back to business, listing off the zombie dragon fangs and breath sacks they need to find, thinking they should aim for 5 dragons total. Camilla looks pretty confident and says she's got the whole plan memorized without even looking. She quietly mumbles about them finally being all alone together, but Ghosh just calls her out for being vague as usual. He looks back at her to see if she actually said something important, catching her off guard and making her blush. She tells him to just forget it, then stutters through an explanation about wanting to cast a protection spell. Ghosh finally agrees to the spell, while Camilla stays on the ground practically begging him to just go with it, so she gets up and starts preparing the magic circle on the floor, moving into position to make sure it works right, and Ghosh looks at the tiny space and asks what's supposed to happen with his own protection spell. But Camilla tells him they're obviously sharing this one. Ghosh isn't so sure about that, pointing out that it's going to be a total squeeze, although she makes excuses about how the spell stops poison and bad smells but only lasts a little while. She says they need to be careful with their resources because making the circle any bigger would have taken up too much room in her bag. Ghosh just watches her talk a mile a minute, then she suddenly holds her arms wide open. Ghosh just stands there looking completely lost as to why she's posing like that until she starts getting red in the face and snaps at him. She asks what he's even doing and tells him to just hurry up already, so he sighs and says he gets it, finally taking that awkward step forward to join her in the tiny circle, ending with the two of them squeezed together in a tight hug. Ghosh looks down at her, both of them feeling the heat of the moment. Camilla is looking away, totally red in the face, while Ghosh mentions he heard mage suits are skin tight for a reason, but this is getting pretty extreme. He's sweating bullets and looking completely flustered, asking her if she doesn't think this whole situation is just way too tight for comfort. Ghosh complains that they're practically on top of each other because it's so cramped, which just makes Camilla start yelling at him. She snaps that she already told him there's no other way and orders him to just get even closer. Ghosh is struggling to keep it together, so he finally tells her he's officially at his limit. He can't handle being this close to her for another second without losing his mind. The protection spirits are starting to get impatient, and Camilla warns him that the spell is about to activate any second now. Ghosh yells out in frustration as they're forced even closer together, but as they collide, he just stands there looking confused. He realizes he's basically hugging her, and he can't help but notice she actually smells really good. The wind starts whipping around them as the magic finally takes hold. As the energy flows, Ghosh suddenly feels surprisingly relaxed. He wonders if the spell has some kind of hidden effect that keeps his mind calm. Ghosh is sweating bullets and thinking about how close they are. Meanwhile, Camilla is getting worried about how long they can keep this up. She tells him he needs to stay completely still and wait for the protection spell to finish. Ghosh just nods, trying to keep it together, while Camilla notices his face is totally red. She realizes she's not the only one feeling super embarrassed about the situation. Moving on, they peek outside and Camilla spots the danger. Ghosh looks out and sees that the area is absolutely crawling with enemies. Camilla starts worrying about what happens if all those monsters start using their breath attacks at once. They'd be hit with a ton of status effects. and Ghosh knows that getting hit even once means they'll probably end up with the curse of rot. He's looking stressed because it's impossible to tell which ones are breathing fire and which ones are spitting poison. So Camilla points out that while they look like regular earth dragons, there's a big problem. Since those dragons eat poisonous plants for breakfast, their breath attacks are going to be a nasty mix of every ailment out there. Ghosh looks back at her and asks if the protection spell they're working on is even going to be enough to keep them safe. Ghosh admits that blocking every single attack is going to be a nightmare, and Camilla agrees even the strongest magic has its limits. So Ghosh asks what the actual plan is. Camilla just gives him this smug look and says the answer is simple. They just need to stack every single status resistance they can possibly think of. Ghosh looks pretty drained just hearing that, but he shifts focus to the dragons nearby. He spots a small one at 2 o'clock and tells Camilla he's going to need backup to take it out. Camilla asks if she should use her mud spell to pin them all down, and Ghosh tells her to go for it, but only once he gives the word. She nods and gets into position while he remembers these undead monsters are supposed to be cleared out anyway. He starts drawing his blade, deciding it's totally fine to just wreck the whole bunch. Seppa starts talking, saying it's been a minute since they really cut loose. She's getting super hyped for the fight, and then Rain tells him good luck and promises to use her sever skill if anything goes sideways. Ghosh tells them both he's counting on them. He realizes the dragons are so rotted they can't see or hear a thing, so sneaking up is going to be a piece of cake. Ghosh waits for the perfect opening and gives the signal to move. Camilla's totally ready and shouts back. She calls out to the spirits of the land to lend her their strength, chanting a spell to turn the ground into a muddy trap. While the enemies are stuck, Ghosh rips through the first dragon with a massive swing. He feels the weight of the kill and notes that's one down. But the strain hits him. Camilla is reeling from the feedback of her own magic, complaining about how intense the power feels. Then she pauses. Realizing that the rush might actually be kind of addictive, Ghosh just looks at her like she's lost it, asking if enjoying that kind of pain is just something you have to get used to. He decides not to judge her too hard and says if she's into it. That's her business. He tells her to keep it moving, and she gives him a quick nod, eyeing the next target. Ghosh points out an earth dragon at the 9 o'clock position and tells Camilla she's up. She acknowledges the order. But before she can even start her next spell, something small grabs her leg and yanks. She barely has time to react before she's pulled right off her feet, leaving Ghosh to yell out her name in shock as the hidden enemy strikes. Camilla looks completely annoyed while she's pinned down. She grumbles about how she can't believe something that small was actually hiding right under them. Ghosh grabs Camilla's shoulder and asks if she's doing okay after that surprise attack. She tries to play it cool but lets out a painful groan, admitting that the situation is definitely bad. She tells him to let go of her hand, insisting that she's perfectly capable of standing on her own. The stubborn elf tells him to stop worrying and focus on the fight because they need to keep taking enemies down. Ghosh asks one more time if she's really alright, but she just snaps at him to hurry up and get moving. He finally backs off but warns her to tell him the second she starts feeling any worse. So the fight eventually wraps up and Ghosh thinks they're in the clear. Then he hears Camilla collapse to the dirt behind him. He rushes over and yells her name, asking if she needs to use the power of the holy sword Seppa to help. Camilla looks pretty rough and explains that the poison is plant-based, so the sword's power might not even work. Ghosh tries to stay calm and asks if she can try a detoxifying spirit spell to clear the venom out. Ghosh says he'll try to help out but tells her not to expect a miracle. Camilla says the poison should just wear off eventually, but Rain floats nearby, looking pretty worried and wondering if Camilla is actually going to be okay. Ghosh tells the little spirit she probably won't be needed for this part, but he tells her to stay ready just in case. Rain says she's got it. Camilla gets all flustered and tells him to stop, but Ghosh just tells her to shut up and let him treat her wounds because the elf is clearly in pain, and Ghosh knows if she passes out, they're losing her protection magic for good. He realizes it's way too dangerous to try and trek all the way back to the teleportation circle at the mountain base. Ghosh remembers seeing a hot spring a little ways back and decides they'll just set up camp there for the night, so he picks her up and she apologizes for the mess, but he just tells her not to sweat it since they're a team. Later on, Ghosh is relaxing in the water, thinking it's a total blessing to find a spot like this in such a wasteland. He washes up and thinks about how he finally ate and took his medicine. He should be ready to move by tomorrow while his spirits keep watch. Ghosh thinks to himself while soaking. He's a bit worried, but since Camilla recommended it, he's just going to relax and enjoy the water. Suddenly he hears something nearby and snaps out of it, splashing around as he asks who's there. He spots a figure standing right in front of him and asks if it's Camilla, but she's not acting like herself at all. Ghosh starts asking what's going on, but the elf just looks down at him and apologizes. Her face is totally red. She's completely out of it and tells him she can't hold back anymore. The situation is getting pretty intense. It turns out the monster they fought earlier had a breath attack full of toxins from a plant called the Phantom Peach Vine, and as Ghosh tries to process what that name means, he hears Stella calling out for him from the side. The kid shows up holding something weird and asks Ghosh what this strange pink lump is supposed to be. He takes a look and explains that it's actually solidified pollen from that same Phantom Peach Vine plant. Ghosh mentions he's never seen the real deal before, but he knows if you mix it with the right catalyst, it basically turns into a crazy aphrodisiac. Ghosh stands there thinking about the pollen and explains that it basically turns into a psychoactive drug, though he tries to act like it's no big deal. But Stella is absolutely losing it and says the name of the plant sounds way too scary. Ghosh is sweating as he looks at her, realizing just how intense this situation actually is, and before he can react, Camilla starts moving closer. Ghosh begins to panic and tells her to wait and just calm down for a second, but his face is bright red as she ignores him. Ghosh is splashing around and totally overwhelmed, telling himself that he's the one who needs to calm down before things go too far. He looks over his shoulder and suggests that if she's really getting into the hot spring with him, it's probably time for him to get out, and she gets even closer, causing Ghosh to plead with her to stop as he calls out her name. Camilla leans in and whispers that he needs to repay his debt to her right here and right now. She looks at him with a flushed face and admits that she never would have given up her first time if it wasn't for him. Camilla is completely out of it with hearts in her eyes as she realizes she's losing control, while Ghosh just stares back totally speechless as she leans her head against his chest, thinking about how she's been way too hyper-aware of him all day long. Ghosh looks completely dazed as he remembers the night, thinking that her sweet voice was just too much for him to handle, and as the moon hangs over the quiet night sky, he admits to himself that he just didn't have the strength to pull away or stop her. The next morning, Ghosh wakes up feeling like a ton of bricks hit him, his back is aching, and his whole body feels heavy as he thinks about yesterday. He lets out a loud shout and buries his face in his hands, totally spiraling over how much he messed everything up. Trying to make sense of it, he tells himself that Camilla was poisoned and he was just panicking, but that wasn't the only reason, because he realizes that if he had actually turned her down right then, it probably would have ruined their friendship forever. That's a future he definitely wants to avoid, so he starts pulling his jacket on while trying to keep his cool. Ghosh leans against the wall to catch his breath, telling himself there's nothing to be ashamed of and that he actually did the right thing. He looks pretty unsure of himself, but he decides he's just going to go with that logic to keep from losing it. Camilla is already dressed and waiting for him with a smirk, saying good morning and teasing him for being such a sleepyhead. Ghosh stammers out a quick reply that he's fine, but Camilla isn't buying it. She mentions he looks completely drained and asks if he's actually doing okay. Ghosh snaps back that this is all her fault, reminding her exactly how many times they kept going, and seeing him so stressed out makes Camilla realize she should probably stop teasing him. Ghosh just rubs his neck looking exhausted, so Camilla sets her drink down and tries to talk seriously about what happened yesterday. Before she can even finish, Ghosh looks her right in the eyes and claims the whole night was just a total accident. Camilla is stunned for a second, but she quickly catches on and says he was just treating her for the poison she'd been suffering from. She keeps the lie going, blushing as she suggests they just stick to that version of the story. Ghosh lets out a breath and tells her he's down with that plan. Camilla gives him a bright, cheerful look now that they're on the same page, but she makes it clear that whatever happened is a strictly guarded secret between them. She is dead serious about never letting anyone else find out. Ghosh just looks away and agrees that keeping quiet is the only obvious choice. Ghosh says he's going to go wash up first, so Camilla offers to get breakfast started. Ghosh tells her that would be a big help, so a little later, Camilla serves up a legit-looking sandwich with bacon and eggs. Ghosh is actually shocked and asks if she even knows how to cook. Camilla just tells him she's getting their rations ready, but she gets a bit annoyed at his tone and asks if he's trying to make fun of her or something. Ghosh admits he just figured Maria did all the cooking back at the house, but Camilla snaps back that she handles the kitchen sometimes too. She tells him to quit talking and hurry up and eat. She's worried that if they don't make it back to the Mages Guild by tonight, everyone is going to think they've gone missing. So the two of them sit together on the rocks and start eating. Ghosh takes a bite and agrees that having a search party sent out for them would be pretty embarrassing. And then he looks down at the sandwich, blushing a little, and quietly admits that the food is actually really good. Camilla gives him a smug little grin and crosses her arms. She tells him he surprisingly doesn't know much about her at all. Ghosh looks over at her and is suddenly struck by how she looks. He starts wondering if she was always this cute, or if he's just seeing her differently now, and he tries to figure out if it's just because of what happened between them yesterday, thinking that maybe he's just way too easy to win over.